And that's 60.
Oh, great.
Sorry, I was talking. I said, Kodiak called twice. Yeah, well, he told the office I don't really live there. No, that's it. They said, no, it's not in. Okay, let us in. Oh, God, we're actually sitting in the we're all gonna look at that. Hey, we went. We both, so it's funny, we both have free room at Riverside if you go like a Sunday through Thursday, so we're like, all right, free room this time.
I moved my sister's, okay, we had to move out of my house this weekend because they were doing my horses, we had that leak, and I mean, you guys, they moved everything in my house.
Excellent, have a seat over
Everything.
there.
So, my sister said, you said this is how
People just gave me your phone.
Oh, no, I'd rather be doing, like you did.
We used to still go.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, I love that. Hey. I said,
That's why I forgot it. Yes, I knew that you looked very good.
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
Nikki.
Good, how are you? I drove that. Not a early morning. You did what? No. Oh. I make them drive real fast. It does. Yeah. I just got that. I don't know. I don't eat there as much as now that we've moved offices, but. No, I knew that there was. So anytime I have meetings about the financial question, that's around lunchtime, I'll try. Yeah. So we're talking about a lot of other meetings going on. Good time to be out. That's right. Way better than January. Kick off the spring. A couple of slow months of travel there.
Does anybody need to sign in? All right, well, I think that we're going to get started. I am Rayanne Wood. I'm the CEO for Southeast Iowa Link, and welcome to the center of our little universe down here in Southeast Iowa. We are very, very happy that you are all able to make it today. And just little housekeeping things. We have plenty of treats in the back, including soda and water and coffee. No creamer. I'll own that. Totally drink my coffee black, straight up caffeine. The more the better. So at break time, I'll run and go grab some cream for those of you that like your coffee a little bit lighter color than what I do. Ken, I want to introduce him also. He did a lot of the essentials of getting everything organized. He is our Des Moines County Coordinator of Disability Service, so thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Ryan.
And then I think that we'll just roll it over to Jackie and let her do her magic, and I think she will have some introduction sort of things for us to do, and look forward to a great day of working together.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, a few other things. We are recording today's session. No one is more horrified about this than I am, but I'm never going to watch it, so I'm just pretending it's not happening. So if you're over here, be careful what you say, because it will be recorded forever. There are... There's like a single stall women's room and then a double stall men's room, but we are almost a radical feminist society here today, and so I think what the idea is to swap. So ladies, if you want to use the men's room, men, if you want to use the single stall women's, or just kind of have a free-for-all.
Just holler when you go in.
Let's see. Any other? We will break for lunch, roughly 12 to 1, so everyone can get some fresh air. And there's plenty of snacks if you need to get up, move around. I have a very short attention span, so I don't fault you if you do too. But hopefully today we'll have some interaction, not too much endless yapping from me. And to start, I know that some of you know each other, some of you don't. So to kind of kick it off, I'd like to do, like at your table, do introductions. And so if you want to, say the basics like your name, where you work, etc. But then also, if you want to share the first job you ever had, or the worst job you ever had. Oh. And then we're going to do a highlight reel at the end. So we'll do that for a few minutes just to kind of get to know each other, and then we'll share back.
Year after year after year. We do improv while we're walking. What is your job then?
Okay. My name's Ken Hyman. I'm from Des Moines County, Burlington. My first job was in Thomas Gilman House Flower Shop. I used to help out giving the flowers to people. That was fun.
So you get a
water flowers and food and all that. 50 cents an hour, so I was overpaid back then. But that was in junior high school. So back when there was no child labor laws. And my first job in social services was as a job coach. That was a great introduction to
Probably just half finished it last year.
But then I came 3 months and then I became a case manager.
Did you do that on your own? Go with your parents.
I had my mom's best friend.
Worst job ever?
Had their own business.
50 cents an hour was pretty bad. But
I helped them when I was 15.
And part of that job was having to go out to like mom-and-pop stores when they were closing down because they couldn't make it, having to tag all their
And you know what?
furniture,
It's weird.
get manpower workers and
I
put them
made
in
some
trucks and
because
take them
I
back.
grew up in a family, so we.
That was a tough thing to watch. Hard work.
I think I saw 2 summers sitting today. Matter of fact, it's such a great picture. I wore my hair up 2 ponytails, and you could see the line because my hair had bleached out so much.
Oh, really?
But I hate it every day. Every day is stressful. Every day. But Emily and I used to work together at First Resources.
Oh,
So, and I work at First Resources and been there 39 years. There was 3 of us that started it, and now it's gone beyond. I mean, Malia worked in the mental health department, and we're heavily involved in supporting clients. I mean, we've got all kinds of. We work in now 5 counties, so I'm not going anywhere else. They keep pressuring me. I'm not. It's like last night, I didn't have staff to work last night, so I worked last night just for a little bit, 11 o'clock, to check on somebody, and it's just, you get that big job, you do, because they really suck you out.
We do get put our mail down.
My first job.
They tell me what you guys open.
So, my first job.
Oh, for Southern Ryan? Yeah. We now have a transition that has 23-hour stabilization and up to a 5-day stay. Just a couple others. Yeah.
Part of it was, what would happen at some regional hospitals was, they would get these individuals in and keep them in a room, 48 hours, not upstairs. They would keep them in the room. And so thank goodness these guys came in, because they no, it was a nightmare.
And then we just recently opened mobile crisis. So we have a crisis team being called out to go to the home and diffuse the situation.
What's the average you go out, do you know? I'd like to see what the situation is.
We've had some
First job
pretty difficult situations, but they've done really, really well.
What about,
Luckily, there's those 2 people. Yes. They don't ever go out
do
alone.
they go bring the law with them?
Occasionally, with the lawman and that's kind of run through foundation too. So that's where we get all of our reports from foundation too.
Cool. We run a mental health department, we run substance abuse, our newest adventure, we had Hope House, that's a residence for women and children. And then we have what called Oak Meadow, that's for men and women, that was way past that one. Wow. Not Hope House, Hope House, they have.
Well, that's something too for our.
It's huge, it's an old group home, it can house a lot of people.
I know that Oak Meadow is like a standing opening. They try to have a standing opening for people from the crisis unit. So we kind of partnered with them for people that have need to go to the street and get them a little quicker.
That's the the vocational, we don't, the vocational, we had 2 workshops now, and they were doing, our biggest one is in Sycamore, Iowa, and we're redoing that now as we speak. And so to make it, close it, and open it as a business, and the individuals that are left will be employees of First Resources. I mean, they have the choice, they have to apply. They're, looking at, the city on recycling, because we get it for everyone. So we said we're done, and so it's really nice work on our dirty work. And so now, all of a sudden, so it covers the wages, and the wages are pretty good. But it's just like, the individuals will be there, but that's, and the rest are, don't want to work or go to the rehab. And our philosophy is during the no,
They go to daycare, but they don't know
but that,
but there's a lot of places.
not supposed to be in as a site. Just like employment first, I think so.
They have to do a lot of community activity.
All right, 1 more minute.
was
was
strict
such a
about that,
rewarding
because we just
job.
got audited.
Like you.
Okay. We thought we were community law and they were strict. I mean, yeah, about schools. I mean, they want children there every day. Like even school zero. Yeah, because our director, the director, she watches. Yeah, so, but, you know, then.
I don't want to even try and think of all.
But hard, it's really hard. It is, and then we got I mean, you know, you can have all these, you know, because they try to find things in the community that are free. But they volunteer.
You use all those things, all your experiences.
And they go to life.
So usually,
I mean, there's some
some
things.
way.
Okay, let's come back together. So let's hello. Welcome. We saved you a spot.
We saved you a spot.
We're just gonna do, well, we did small group introductions and now we're gonna introduce ourselves to the big group. So let's, if you wanna say your name, where you work, and if you want, your first job or your worst job. I'm Jackie, work for the IPS Center in New Hampshire, and my first job, when I was 14, I got a job at Hardee's near my house. And I got up at like 5 and 6 in the morning and made biscuits and salads. And now I'm not a morning person at all. But it worked out. There were several things that it was close to. I would just walk. They were nice. By the time I left, I had like the second longest tenure of anybody there. And I was like 17 years old. Fast food. Want to go?
Yeah. I'm Cody Amison. I'm operations director at Tenco, and my first job was at Fairway, unloading a truck first thing in the morning before I went to school.
I'm Dixie Merritt. I'm the vocational services director for Tenco, and I worked at a little grocery store with my first job in Andrew, Iowa, which had a population of maybe 250 people.
Ken Heinman, I'm the coordinator of disability services for Des Moines County. And my first job was working at Doss Blumenhaus, where my mom worked. She got me a job after school, and I worked for 50 cents an hour during junior high, and
Junior high?
from 3:30 to 5 before child labor laws. And every Saturday from 8 to 5, and so
Hardcore.
yes, but it was all good for me. I got to jump out of the car, deliver flowers, or water the greenhouse, and all that kind of stuff. You know.
Hi, I'm Krista Hackenberg. I'm program coordinator employment service program coordinator for Hope Haven in Burlington. And my first job was a dietary aide at the Morning Sun Care Center.
I'm David Crawford. I'm the program supervisor of IHH at Hillcrest. My first job was, I was a detasseler, and I loved it so much I did it for 9 years.
Wow.
But I started at 13, so.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Amy Dessenberg, and I help manage the Iowa Coalition for Integration and Employment. And my worst job was walking beans.
Walking what?
Beans.
What does that mean?
Yeah. You walk through a field and you take out the weeds in a bean field.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. Sounds way more glamorous than it is.
Yeah.
Malia Mira, I work for Southern Iowa Mental Health Center as the Integrated Health Home Team Lead. And my first job was cleaning businesses.
Did you like it?
No.
Yeah.
Cindy Kurtz Hopkins, First Resources, coordinator at Support Employment. And my first job was babysitting. So, and I didn't like it, but I babysat many years.
Lynn Nibelink, and I'm from Mental Health and Disabilities Division with DHS. And my first job was bean walking, and I loved it. We had the same crew that did like for 4, 5, or 6 years in a row. But see, I think why I loved it is because we did improv and we made up songs and things all along the way. And we pretended we were in movies.
No, I love that.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Denise Jewell, and I'm the program coordinator for employment services at AmeriGroup. My first job was as a waitress in a little cafe, and I was underage, again, before child labor law. But I applied 3 times. I wanted that job.
Nice.
And I loved it. I thought it was great. You know, just working with people, I learned a lot. It was a lot of fun.
Persistence.
I'm Angie Michelson, and I'm the disability coordinator at Southeastern Community College. And my first job was probably babysitting, but the first real paycheck I got would have been when I was a dietary aide at a nursing home. And I worked after school, the evening shift. And I was telling this table, the worst food that we always served was split pea soup, and you could smell it. As soon as you walked in the door.
Really bad when you're hungover.
Some of the blended food was pretty good, like the fruits. It was like
a smoothie, I guess.
it wasn't so bad that split pea soup, it just smell.
Scarred you for life.
Oh, I don't think I would eat it.
It's not that pretty either.
Yeah. I'm Rachel Miller, and I'm a vocational rehabilitation counselor for the Iowa Department for the Blind. One of my first and worst jobs was detasseling. I lasted one summer. It was the summer of '93, if anyone remembers. That was a really bad year.
Like it was really hot, or
The flooding was
flooding.
incredible. It was awful.
500-year flood. Right?
Yep, I think
We've
so.
had 3 years, 3 times since.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
Cindy Whalen, Voc Rehab Supervisor at the Burlington office, and I'll go with my worst job, and I told these guys that I worked at Shearer's on the cracker line, so it was salting crackers, and it was a weekend shift, so it was like 12-hour days, and the cracker dust and salt bothered my eyes, and they got all red and puffy and kind of swollen, and I couldn't do it.
you worked at a cracker factory?
A Cookie and Crackers. It's a big
Cool.
factory in Burlington.
That's a really
It used
good
to be
random
Vista.
job. That's awesome.
Monica Brockway, I'm the supervisor for Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation Services in Iowa City. And one of my first jobs was at Michael's Fun World in Davenport, which I thought was going to be fun. And all of the boys worked there in high school. Well, I was assigned to the batting cages, which was in a warehouse in the back of Michael's Fun World by myself. And people would, practice throwing balls and things. That was my job to get all the balls when people were out, and it was boring and hot, and it just wasn't a good match.
I'm sorry.
It was not fun.
It didn't live up to your expectations.
Right.
Such a bummer.
I'm Tammy Burlingame. I'm Vice President of Community Services with WCDC in Washington. My first job was waitressing, very young age. Really small mom and pop shop. I think I ended up cooking, waitressing, bartending, probably at 14 then too.
Hi, my name's Annette Remick. I'm Program Director for Goodwill. My worst job was making elephant ears at the Illinois State Fair.
Oh, wow. Too hot.
August, Friday night.
Yeah.
But I did it 3 summers, so obviously I didn't learn.
I'm Kara Roberts, employment specialist with Goodwill in Burlington. My first job was at Taco Bell. And it didn't last very long.
Ryan Wood, my first job, if you want to call it that, was walking beans also, but it was for one of my best friend's dads. So it was more about like putting baby oil all over you and getting tan. My first real job was waitressing in a very small, little cafe where all the farmers go and hang out and drink coffee every morning. I learned more about farming than what I ever wanted to know, despite the fact that I was a country girl to begin with. So probably got me into psychology.
We all have a meandering path, right? I love doing that exercise because it's funny to hear about like what people initially did, and I think that so much of for myself, like so much of my vocational path has been really random, and I like to keep that in mind in the work that we do, because sometimes I have gotten like really linear with people, but really a lot of times it's trial and error and like on a whim, or people fall into something. I fell into doing vocational services and loved it, and here I am, however many years later. 14. So, how many of you were on the webinar that we did? Okay, fair number of you. I want to do like a little bit of a review, but I don't want to bore you to death, so it's going to be a little bit more interactive. But so I just kept some of the same slides. But first off, okay, so let's do a pop quiz. I have a few questions. What is an evidence-based practice? Anybody want to define that or say what you think it means? Come on.
A strategy that's been tested.
Yeah, that's great. A strategy that's been tested and proven to work. Yeah. Anything else? Lynn, would you like to add something?
There's research behind it. It shows that it works better than other things.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Probably measurable, like the fidelity scales and all that.
Yeah, a lot of evidence-based practices have kind of a treatment manual or some kind of like manualized intervention, so that way you can test it. It's not varied across places. Yeah. There's evidence-based practices in all kinds of disciplines. I didn't really realize that for a long time, but so like in education or whatever, and I am a kind of a sensible, logical person, and so this appeals to me to do something that I know works, and that's why I like IPS. And I think when something comes along that works better, I'm going to be all about that, So what does IPS stand for?
Individual placement and supports.
A+, individual placement and support. Okay, this one is a little bit more complicated. Okay, so Susan, I thought about putting my own name in there, but I just left it. Jackie was recently fired from her job for repeatedly showing up late. According to the IPS model, this indicates that Susan is not ready to go back to work yet. B, demonstrates Susan's unwillingness to return to work. C, is viewed as a positive learning experience. Or D, is a good time to refer Susan to a training program that will teach her the skills she needs to succeed in the future. How many of you think A? There's no shame. B, C, D. According to the IPS model, C is correct. See it as a positive learning experience. The short telemarketing stint I did was a positive learning experience. I learned that I did not like doing that. I have another one here. Okay, so which of the following is an example of competitive employment? A, working for a mental health agency in a position reserved for people receiving services there. B, a temp job as a sales clerk that pays $12 an hour and is set up by the agency as a short-term work experience. C, working indefinitely as a janitor making a minimum wage. Or D, occasionally babysitting for one's family and friends. How many of you think A? B? C? D? It is C. You know they say when you do multiple choice tests that C is often the right answer?
Both of yours have been.
Right. I need to up my game. Okay. So a little bit of an overview of what we're going to do. This is a moving target. So today we're going to review the basics of IPS, including principles, research, etc. We're going to look at IPS fidelity, how it might apply to your program, discuss ways to fund IPS. I know that is something I've talked about with all of you. Highlight effective collaboration strategies between different providers, and then talk about using data to improve services. And then tomorrow, we're going to learn more about helping people who have criminal records, providing strength-based services, providing vocational assessment using the IPS career profile, career exploration and supported ed, job development and job retention supports. But it's flexible, so if you have things you want to learn about, please bring them up, because I want to talk about them, and we are not beholden to this schedule. Okay. We are in charge of ourselves. Okay, so this, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, so I'm going to kind of go through this, but like, why do we care about employment? Why? Is it a health service? Is it, like, why does it matter for people? Some of the answers are up there, but why, I mean, so many of you are vocational providers, and all of you support vocational services in one way or another. Why do you care? Like, why?
It improves their quality of life.
It improves people's quality of life, for sure.
Gives them a purpose.
Yeah, it gives people a purpose.
Employment's often a part of our identity, and it is a common theme of conversation and.
Yeah, it's such a huge part of how people identify themselves, right? And what we ask people when we're getting to know them. Yeah.
What do you do for a living?
Right. Other things?
Pay the bills.
It's normalizing and fights against stigma.
Yeah, I love that. Like community integration and like dismantling stereotypes. It's really cool. Other things?
Gives you a chance to use your own gifts and abilities.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels good, right? To be able to contribute to something bigger than yourself. Yeah. You know, I care about promoting employment services because so many people want to work but don't. People with serious mental illness. So, you know, in general, it's like 10 to 15% of people with serious mental illness work, but like over half of them want to work. So there's this huge gap between, and usually it's availability of services, right? Like people, or they're not able to get the help that they like really need to be able to meet their goal. You know, that I'm sure we all know from our personal experience or people in our family or whatever, but that unemployment causes mental health problems. For me, I cannot have too much. As much as I would like to be a woman of leisure, I cannot have too much free time because, you know, it's just not good for my mental health. It's true for many people. And having a job, right, means financial independence, a sense of purpose, and being a part of society. And I think that that can be true if you're working 5 hours a week or 50, right? Like I've seen people, I'm sure you've seen people too, where they work like a really small job that doesn't seem important at all, but it completely changes them, right? Like it becomes so important. Yeah, structures their life. So it's a typical role for adults. It's often seen as an essential part of recovery from mental illness, and then also for people who aren't like super into the heart part of it, like it makes good financial sense because people who become steady workers have dramatically reduced health treatment costs, mental health treatment and public benefit costs. So like, you know, they'll get less SSI or whatever, but then also they feel better. So they have reduced hospitalizations, and about half of the people who get jobs in IPS go on to be steady workers. So that there's room for improvement there, but it's pretty good. That's just I'll send you all this. I didn't want to print it out because I'm enough of a tree killer, but you know, basically proof that people want to work. Okay. Why IPS? We know that it works well, and they've done a lot of research studies on IPS, controlled trials, and usually the control service is like the best practice of that area, and people in IPS generally are 2.5 times more likely to get a job. And I just like co-authored my first research paper with Gary Bond and Bob Drake. I felt like super cool when it came out. Like 5 people can read it, you know. Like who's gonna pay $40 to read a 10-page article? I'll send it to you for free if you want. But anyway, we did a review looking at all these studies of IPS for people other than folks with serious mental illness, and it also works for a lot of other people. So like common mental disorders was like depression, anxiety, PTSD, people with spinal cord injuries. They did a big 2 studies of that in the VA. People with autism, opioid use disorders, other groups. And it makes sense because it's a pretty straightforward approach. Like you find out what people want to do, you help them right away to do it, you help them again if they don't do it, you know, you just like keep going. So it's straightforward in that regard. Okay. I have a video. I know I read these quotes to you on the webinar. But so we know that working makes people feel good. Back in the day, last year, when I was in California, we did, this computer is not hooked up to there. Okay, we did a study, I led this consumer and family advocacy group. They were such a rad group of people, and they really wanted to make a video talking about work as a point of recovery. And so the video features different people sharing their stories, so we're going to watch it. This is our one multimedia experience here today. And I'm in it. It's horrifying. When I see it. It's like hearing your own voicemail message, you know, that kind of stuff. Can everybody hear okay? California has exceptionally bad employment outcomes for people with mental health issues.
Robert is just like you and I. Every night, he has to set his alarm clock, and when the alarm clock goes off, he gets up. Robert does his morning routine, which includes freshening up, putting on a uniform. He'll make a cup of coffee. And after Robert has gone through his morning routine, he's just like the rest of us. He's got to commute to work, and that includes having to fight the crowds on BART. And Robert goes to work.
Working with Robert has been an honor and a privilege, and I have just been able to witness him grow in leaps and bounds. Employment has really been the stepping stone for him to achieve many other goals that he set for himself in his life. Most importantly, living on his own independently. For 30 years, he lived with family members, and being employed allowed him the opportunity to move out on his own into a one-bedroom apartment. It also encouraged him to go back to school, and he's currently in a program, a biomanufacturing program, at the local junior college. My role as an employment specialist supervisor is to be a resource, an advocate, a source of inspiration, and most importantly, a mentor. The most important aspect of my job is watching people bust out of the boxes that they've been placed in, and to overcome the stigma that surrounds their mental health issues.
Employment to me means having good structure in my life, social interactions, and some income, because when I was unemployed, I got really tired of being broke. So it's very important to my wellness.
And employment means to me freedom, and it provides an opportunity to be independent and I feel productive. I feel like I'm part of the community. One thing about IPS is they help you talk to an employer. They work with you, and so that helped me. Just the fact that there was somebody to help me every step of the way to get back into the workforce.
My name is Nancy, and this is part of my story. I had a nervous breakdown when my husband left. My daughter was 3.5. I had to live with my folks for a while. My daughter graduated from UCLA in 2003. I had worked as a product demonstrator for a dental services company 9 years and brand ambassador for a pet food company since July of 2014.
My name is Vincent Lopez, and I work at Bean to the Groove Record Store in Niles, Fremont. The task I have is maintenance, which is keeping the Bean to the Groove's record store clean, and also it's keeping records sorted the way they're supposed to be, evenly and square. So I look at the dollar bill records, check each sleeve, and if they're like new and they're not torn on the ends, then I stack them up and then give them to the boss.
You know, talking to him and his knowledge of music, which I already knew, it would be a perfect fit for the record store. We want somebody, if somebody asks them a question, they know what they're talking about. And Vince is like a dictionary. So he knows so much stuff. I mean, I ask him questions all the time about certain records and labels, and he's like, oh, it's on this, and it was released in 1967, and just it's really awesome, actually.
Work, it's great to get paid, but it's a sense of pride knowing that you're contributing something to the community, service. And I'm sure over there they support him quite a bit by saying, good job, Vin. And, you know, it helps with self-confidence, because there's times he's on his own and he's not overwhelmed by situations. So it's a lot of being more self-confident. The rest of the family, what they think it's great. They think it's a great avenue for him to grow and be self-sufficient. They're proud of him. You know, they always tell Vince, we're really proud of you, how you're working now, and they bring back, remember when you couldn't do it, now you can. So when you meet a problem you think you can't handle, just think what you're doing now. You're working, you're self-sufficient.
My son is 19, and when he was born, like all moms, you know, I had great dreams. I had great dreams for him. Sometimes I'm walking past a college or a high school, you know, kids that are his age, and I see the kids bouncing across the crosswalk with their backpacks, and they're interacting with each other, and it's that grief and that anger again. Why? You know, why my son? Work gives him a place of belonging. You know what we want as humans? We want a place to belong on this planet. We want a tribe. We want people. We want to be respected and to add to the world. And work gives him that. When he works, he's the best worker ever. That's when he starts thinking about going back to school. It's a very big point of stabilization for him. I don't want consumers or family members to, you know, people who are going through this to lose hope. There's hope. You can have ups and downs, but there is hope. I've lived it and I've seen it. And if my son was here, he would tell you the same thing.
IPS is a really great service because it helps people who want to get back to work do so. And when people are working, it has so many benefits for them personally. They end up having more money, they end up feeling better, and contributing to society in a way that they can really feel proud of. If you're an employer, I encourage you to check out candidates from our IPS programs. People have so many strengths and skills to offer and would be a great asset to your business.
IPS really allows individuals to not only just dream big, but it becomes a reality because they're able to go back to work, they're able to go to school, and they're able to do something that maybe for years people have been telling them that you can't go back to work, that you're not going to be able to hold down a full-time or a part-time job, that you're not well enough, or you're not stable enough. But IPS completely dismisses all of that, and employment specialists are there to provide that support and be with you every step of the way to help you to find the job that you want.
Great, Jackie.
Good times. It's fun to see all those guys. Any reactions to the video? Any thoughts?
Excellent.
Cool. Flattery. I really like that video. I was not the mastermind behind that video. And Kim at the end was like the one who really made the magic happen. But it's really fun to hear people's stories. And then Sherry, the family member, talking about her son. She. So I think. Anyway, we'll go on. So these are a couple, employer perspectives, client perspectives. I feel like I don't count when I don't work, but when I work, I am proud. Okay, so I know that we talked about the practice principles. I have a handout on what we're going to do. So there's 8 principles and there's 4 tables. So each table is going to define 2 of them, and then we'll come back and share. Now, in an effort to not waste paper, also, I accidentally printed them 2-sided. On the back, it has the answers. So, raise your hand and say, I will not turn my page over. I believe in you. So, you guys want to do 1 and 2, 3 and 4.
It's more just a curiosity.
It is, that's.
Yeah.
There are plenty of snacks. Now is a great time to get snacks. So we'll do this for like, I don't know, 5-10 minutes, and then we'll come back and go through it together.
That's where you're working at minimum wage or more. In the community.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea.
How to.
I think too, some of these are pretty straightforward, but if you want to add to like, how might this be similar to what you're already doing or different than what you're already doing?
Stops it.
Stop here. Let's see. Okay, so let's just start at the beginning. This table, you had principle 1 and 2. Can you tell me what you put for zero exclusion eligibility based on client choice? Who's going to be the spokesperson for your table? Cody. Thank you for your service, Cody.
As far as definition, it was just pretty much the idea of no eject, no reject. Anyone that wants to come in, there is no. It's whoever wants to access the services is eligible to do so.
Do you think that is something that your programs do or would need to work on, or what was your discussion around that at your table?
So obviously I can only speak on behalf of TENCO. I won't speak on behalf of any other provider. But I feel like we are relatively inclusive, but we do have our own eligibility criteria for different programs. So this would be kind of a whole different avenue for us as far as the population that we serve. So no, I don't think that TENCO would satisfy that principle.
Sure.
We
I
talked
think
about,
too, it's like, oh,
the
go ahead,
group of
Jeff.
sex offenders or something like that that are tougher to serve.
Yeah.
Might not get as broad a services as others in reality.
Yeah, totally. It's not to say too, with zero exclusion, that you serve anybody who walks in your door, but that, you know, of the eligible folks, like from VR or from the IHH or wherever you get clients from, that you wouldn't say they can't access your services if they're having a variety of personal problems. So using drugs
So
or alcohol, being homeless, like.
So to that point, I would say that yes, with the minor piece of right now, we do not provide service to people on sex offender registry.
Okay.
So that would be the one caveat.
And if you can't find funding for a person, that's another barrier sometimes.
Yeah. Great. Any questions? Anybody have anything they want to add?
We just don't do services for free anymore. We just can't. I mean,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
why I'm right there with them.
Yeah. No, I don't. This principle more is around just not, like
Not
taking
picking
taking somebody into your program who's eligible based on like other criteria, but taking them in if they want to work, and that being the main sort of decision criteria. Cool. Great job. And then the second principle, IPS services integrated with mental health.
I guess for us, that pretty much was just that it's a full team approach and that we make sure everyone is involved on behalf of the client. That they're the main focus, but you bring in all avenues of support.
Beautiful. Yeah. Is that something that you, at TENCO you do, or things people think they could work on?
So I think the attempt is there to make sure that the entire team is eligible, or that everyone is in attendance, excuse me. But I think we're in a world where everyone is pulled 1,000 different directions. So trying to get everyone at the table all the time when it's needed. Because historically we will have people come in who want to work today, but by the time we get a meeting in place, which might be 3 weeks down the road, things change. You know? So that's probably one of the barriers. But I would say we try. The effort is there to make sure that everyone's there and it's a holistic approach. But
yeah, great. So I talked with probably all of you about integration, and I know that this is going to be something that will be a work in progress because of the rural nature of your, that you're accepting clients from a variety of different referral sources, that it's going to be more difficult. It's not like you're just partnering with one mental health agency or just VR and you get all your clients from there. It sounds like for everyone it's pretty wide. And for the IHH providers, like you're referring folks to multiple vocational providers. So this is often like more of a structural principle, right? Like how can we organize so that you're getting sort of more referrals from fewer sources, and then that way it's easier to have your staff collaborate and come to meetings and that sort of thing. Great. Next one, this table.
Focus on community employment.
Thank you, Cindy.
Yes. We're all with each other, working at minimum wage or above, working in the community, working with integration. I mean, what I'm trying to say, you said it.
People without disabilities.
Yeah.
Anybody can apply.
Anybody can apply. So, I mean, that's what support employment is to us. That's what we strive for. Every provider.
Yeah. Awesome. How about the next one?
You guys can.
Job search starts soon after someone expresses interest in working.
This is the one that we talked about, was really interesting because this is what First Resources throughout the history, sometimes it just happens that you get on it, you get that job and all that. But from job readiness, we move a little bit slower from doing the discovery to all that process to find the right, correct job match.
Yeah.
But so we have to rethink some of this to get on a little bit quicker because, we like to take our little steps and follow them, and sometimes we're gonna have to push some of those steps out for the competitive employment, so.
Yeah, or do, I think that's a great point. And then sort of doing some things at the same time instead of like in steps. So that can feel a little bit squirrely.
Yes.
For people.
Yes.
Yeah.
It will.
So we talked about the importance of rapid placement when people have an interest for employment, that you start right away. And I wrote, hit when the iron's hot.
Yeah, that's great. I think I'm sure we've all met clients where it's like they really had a strong desire to work, but because of like bureaucratic processes and whatever, they lose their mojo pretty fast, right? And they're like, oh, you can't help me, bye.
Right.
And so I think that like striking while the iron's hot is important because it keeps people more engaged, and then it's not necessarily that they need to get a job right away, but that you know, we're out there helping them look and
keeping them motivated.
Yeah, keeping them motivated. It's great. So the general idea is that within a month we want to be making in-person employer contact with or for that person. That doesn't mean they need to start a job right away. And sometimes that can mean going to gather information to go back to the client and share. So it's not that they need to be applying for that job right away. Okay, great. How about the next one? Employment specialists build relationships with employers based on client interests. Who's going to be the spokeswoman of this? It's like a game of chicken.
Yeah.
I wrote just locate jobs and employers with matching interests of the job candidate, and just really simple.
Yeah.
Understanding what they want, and finding a job that matches.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that sounds pretty straightforward. I think the idea too is like if somebody has a really random job goal, and if we don't have an employer relationship with an employer like that, then we would go out and try to make one. Versus like having a set list of available jobs or something. And then how about the next one? Job retention supports are continuous. You guys got two easy ones.
We just want to say true.
True.
Yes.
True. Okay. Yeah, this is pretty self-explanatory. And then last but certainly not least, consumer preferences are honored. Who's that?
It's just listening to the individual, taking into account their preferences for scheduling, the types of work they want to do, and not just thinking that you know what they want or what they need.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you feel like that's something that your program does well or could improve on?
I think we overall do a good job listening. It doesn't mean that it's always available.
Yeah.
What it is that they want to do.
Yeah. I was doing TA for a program, and they were working with young adults, and so they were having troubles. And they were talking about how this client like would never get up in the morning. So he kept missing their appointments because they scheduled them in the morning because they're like, well, he needs to learn how to get up. But then he kept missing all of his appointments, right? So like, maybe you could just schedule his appointments in the afternoon and like help him find an afternoon job. You know, it's like dude cannot wake up. Like you're fighting a losing battle here. There are plenty of jobs that start in the afternoon. So that is kind of one example too of like how we provide services, if possible, to kind of match someone's preferences. Right. And to like, I think more subtly too, like not be judgmental about people's preferences. I had this psychiatrist I worked with, and I helped somebody get a job like collecting signatures or whatever on the street, you know, and he was like a hustler, so he loved it. And like, you know, I don't know if they still do this. I haven't seen it as much anymore, but it's like, do you have a minute for the environment? You know, like, do you have a minute for gay rights? And they're like trying to get you to give them money. He did so well at that job, but like he told his psychiatrist about it, and it was like, that's not a real job.
Oh,
yeah, it is. You know, it's like, dude's getting a paycheck. It's a real job.
Yeah, hello.
It's for the environment. No. Anyway, so I don't know why I said that, but how about the last one? Benefits counseling is offered to everyone who receives benefits.
Oak Rehab offers benefits counseling and also partner with sports persons and Social Security.
Yeah.
Really good to get a benefits query to see where you're at too.
Yeah. How many of you have ever gotten a benefits query? They're pretty cool. I love looking at that stuff. But it's important because how many folks do you meet with where they're not really sure what they get, right? But they're very different types of entitlements, and it's important for people to have accurate information about how working is going to impact them. Okay, well, you guys did a great job. The ones on the back are not in the same order as the ones on the front. So, my apologies for that. Okay. So let's see. So the practice principles of IPS, these are, sort of foundational tenets. There's 25 areas of fidelity that kind of lay on top of this, but I think these principles give you kind of the spirit of the service and a general idea of kind of how it's structured. And it's a lot better than going through 25 areas of fidelity. So here's my one cartoon. I was looking at, I teach in the IPS online course that we offer and for practitioners. And this client, or this employment specialist in Australia, I always get all these international students, which I love, but she's like, yeah, I did a presentation for an employer. And I was like, oh, tell me more about your presentation. Like, what do you talk about? And so she sent me her PowerPoint, and it had this cartoon in it. I'm pretty sure I stole it from someone, so let the IPS cycle be unbroken. So, I feel like I've had all those thoughts about jobs. Hate to have a job where I get up early in the morning. Hate to have a job where you stay in the same place all day. And I'd hate to have a job where you have to be nice to everybody. There's something for everyone. Okay, how are we doing? Should we go through the research quick and then take a break? Or do you want to take a break now? Pretty energetic. Keep going? Okay. So I talked about this on the webinar, but I'll go through it briefly again. If you want to talk IPS research, I'm happy to talk with you more. But I know this is not everybody's most interesting thing you've ever heard, so I'll just kind of go through it briefly. A lot of places have done a randomized controlled trial around IPS. This is a sort of high level of effectiveness in research, right, where you have a intervention and a control group, and you randomly assign people to one or the other, so the characteristics of the clients are the same in each group. And then you see how the employment outcomes go, or other outcomes do. And so I'm like, why do they keep doing them if there's 25 or 27? But a lot of the newer ones are in other countries, so they're trying to see in their local context, does this work? Or they may be, that's mainly it. Or just many people are like, oh, it's different here, so we should test it out here. But in general, it works everywhere. So this is my colleague Gary Bond. He makes this graph. It's like his pet project to add to it. So this is the competitive employment rates, which is the percentage of clients on a caseload who are working. And it's a good marker for other things too. So the competitive employment rate kind of relates to job tenure and wage and whatever, according to Gary, genius researcher dude. So the black line is IPS, the red line is the control group, and that random orange line in Connecticut, they had 2 control groups. So you can see that IPS works better. This is where IPS works 2.5 times better. That's where this comes from, and it really varies. So that little graphic there, but that first is a study in New Hampshire they did in the 90s. So almost 80% of the IPS clients worked, 40% of the control. I mean, that's really high. And then it kind of goes down. So there's these sad little ones on the end, right, on the right, and like, well, they overall were like not so good, right? So like what happened there, and the third one in Illinois, that was a study looking at folks with criminal justice involvement. So they had sort of depressed outcomes overall. That UK one, they enrolled a bunch of people in the study who didn't want to work.
Oh no.
So surprise, like a bunch of people didn't get a job. So anyway, it varies. And then some of those, like in Switzerland or Holland, I think having, people are better taken care of when they're unemployed, right? And the labor market is really different, and so there's some local considerations. But overall, here's all the details about the studies, and everyone showed a significant advantage to IPS. The average employment rate for the studies was 56% for IPS, 23% for controls.
Wow.
In the IPS learning community, there's about 350 programs that submit outcomes each quarter, and the average competitive employment rate last quarter was 46%. So not 56, but getting there.
Yeah. So what was that? Did you say 150 what? Did you say that? What was it that people that are involved in this program?
So the IPS learning community has 24 states, and then in the states, there's several programs that submit quarterly outcomes to our center, and then we compile them and give them back in different tables. And so last quarter, it's always changing, but the average competitive employment rate was 46%, and that's gone up. Like during the recession, it was like 42, so it kind of varies. But it's almost always in the 40s. And then this is looking at 18-month outcomes for people in 4 studies. So you can see that, because it's like, oh, well, more people may have worked, but I bet they didn't keep their jobs that long, or they didn't make as much money, or whatever. And so this is showing that, 70% of IPS folks got jobs, 24% of the control group. Way more people were working over 20 hours a week. People got their jobs much faster. Still not really that fast, but IPS 140 days, and then the control group 212 days. Total hours, IPS folks worked almost 4 times as many hours, and then made almost 4 times as much money. So, yeah. Research. I sent Gary this article. I was like, why the p-value should be obsolete. I was like, I don't even know what that means, but he's like super into it. He's like, oh, this is really controversial, Jackie. And then this is that IPS is helpful for people across different kind of demographics within serious mental illness. So works equally well for people of all genders, ages, diverse racial and ethnic backgrounds, etc. And then this is my highly prestigious research article that 4 people have read, that it has worked for those folks. This is the graph I made. So this is the, compare, the black line is IPS, the gray line is the control group services. So it's more varied, but several of the studies were adaptations of IPS, and a lot of them were in Europe, so it just varies. Those middle ones, the really high lines, those are PTSD studies within the VA. And then the spinal cord injury one is on the far right. That was in the VA too. Oh, here's the IPS learning community. So if Iowa State someday were to join the IPS learning community, and then we could get Indiana, we'd have like a whole block of people right there, and you guys would be like,
rocking it.
Yeah. And then also, I've been sort of interested, can we get Idaho or Nevada so we can have a land bridge across the United States?
Yeah.
Then I was like, we could get a bus, an IPS bus, and do a road trip. Debbie's like, no.
Yeah.
That'd be so funny though, right?
And then we could go international.
Exactly. Yeah, we take the ferry to Alaska. Okay. Let's take a break. 10 minutes. Get some sun. have some donuts.
Back in the back.
There's really good coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Other drinks.
Drinks, yep.
Let's see. Okay, so let's just start at the beginning. This table, you had principle 1 and 2. Can you tell me what you put for zero exclusion eligibility based on client choice? Who's going to be the spokesperson for your table? Cody. Thank you for your service, Cody.
As far as definition, it was just pretty much the idea of no eject, no reject. Anyone that wants to come in, there's no, there is no. It's whoever wants to access the services is eligible to do so.
Do you think that is something that your programs do or would need to work on, or what was your discussion around that at your table?
So obviously I can only speak on behalf of TENCO. I won't speak on behalf of any other provider. But I feel like we are relatively inclusive, but we do have our own eligibility criteria for different programs. So this would be kind of a whole different avenue for us as far as the population that we serve. So no, I don't think that TENCO would satisfy that principle.
Sure.
We
I think
talked
too,
about,
it's like, oh,
the
go ahead,
group of
yeah.
sex offenders or something like that that are tougher to serve.
Yeah.
Might not get as broad a services as others in reality.
Yeah, totally. It's not to say too with zero exclusion that you serve anybody who walks in your door, but that, you know, of the eligible folks, like from VR or from the IHH or wherever you get clients from, that you wouldn't say they can't access your services if they're having a variety of personal problems. So using drugs or alcohol, being homeless, like.
So to that point, I would say that yes, with the minor piece of right now, we do not provide service to people on sex offender registry.
Okay.
So that would be the one caveat.
And if you can't find funding for a person, that's another barrier sometimes.
Yeah. Great. Any questions? Anybody have anything they want to add?
We just don't do services for free anymore. We just can't. I mean,
that's
why I'm right there with them.
Yeah. No, I don't. This principle more is around just not like taking somebody into your program who's eligible based on like other criteria, but taking them in if they want to work. And that being the main sort of decision criteria. Cool. Great job. And then the second principle, IPS services integrated with mental health.
I guess for us, that pretty much was just that it's a full team approach and that we make sure everyone is involved on behalf of the client. But they're the main focus, but you bring in all avenues of support.
Beautiful. Yeah. Is that something that you, at TENCO you do, or things people think they could work on?
So I think the attempt is there to make sure that the entire team is eligible, or that everyone is in attendance, excuse me. But I think we're in a world where everyone is pulled 1,000 different directions, so trying to get everyone at the table all the time when it's needed. Because, you know, historically, we will have people come in who want to work today, but by the time we get a meeting in place, which might be 3 weeks down the road, things change. You know? So that's probably one of the barriers, but I would say we try. The effort is there to make sure that everyone's there and it's a holistic approach. But
yeah, great. So I talked with probably all of you about integration, and I know that this is going to be something that will be a work in progress because of the rural nature of your, you know, that you're accepting clients from a variety of different referral sources, that it's going to be more difficult. It's not like you're just partnering with one mental health agency or just VR and you get all your clients from there. It sounds like for everyone it's pretty wide. And for the IHH providers, like you're referring folks to multiple vocational providers. So this is often like more of a structural principle, right? Like how can we organize so that you're getting sort of more referrals from fewer sources, and then that way it's easier to have your staff collaborate and come to meetings and that sort of thing. Great. Next one, this table.
Focus on community employment.
Thank you, Cindy.
Yes. We're all with each other, working at minimum wage or above, working in the community, you know, working with integration, what I'm trying to say, you said it.
People without disabilities.
Yeah.
Anybody can apply.
Anybody can apply,
yeah.
so.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what support employment is to us. That's what we strive for, every
Great.
provider.
Yeah. Awesome. How about the next one?
What are you guys gonna-
Job search starts soon after someone expresses interest in working.
This is the one that we talked about, was really interesting because this is what First Resources, throughout the history, sometimes it just happens that you get on it, you get that job and all that. But from job readiness, we move a little bit slower from doing the discovery to all that process to find the right, correct job match.
Yeah.
But so we have to rethink some of this to get on a little bit quicker, because you know, we like to take our little steps and follow them, and sometimes we're gonna have to push some of those steps out for the competitive employment, so.
Yeah, or do, I think that's a great point. And then sort of doing some things at the same time instead of like in steps. So that can feel a little bit squirrely.
Yes.
For people, yeah.
So we talked about the importance of rapid placement when people have an interest for employment, that you start right away, and I wrote hit when the iron's hot.
Yeah, that's great. I think I'm sure we've all met clients where it's like they really had a strong desire to work, but because of like bureaucratic processes and whatever, they lose their mojo pretty fast, right? And they're like, oh, you can't help me, bye.
Right.
And so I think that like striking while the iron's hot is important, because it keeps people more engaged, and then it's not necessarily that they need to get a job right away, but that you know, we're out there helping them look and
Keeping them motivated.
yeah, keeping them motivated. It's great. So the general idea is that within a month we want to be making in-person employer contact with or for that person. That doesn't mean they need to start a job right away. And sometimes that can mean going to gather information to go back to the client and share. So it's not that they need to be applying for that job right away. Okay, great. How about the next one? Employment specialists build relationships with employers based on client interests. Who's going to be the spokeswoman? It's like a game of chicken.
Yeah.
I wrote just locate jobs that employers with matching interests of the job candidate, and just really simple.
Yeah.
Understanding what they want, finding a job that matches.
Yeah, great. Yeah, this one's pretty straightforward. I think the idea too is like if somebody has a really random job goal, and if we don't have an employer relationship with an employer like that, then we would go out and try to make one. Versus like having a set list of available jobs or something. And then how about the next one? Job retention supports are continuous. You guys got two easy ones.
We just want to say true.
True.
Yes.
True. Okay, yeah, this is pretty self-explanatory. And then last but certainly not least, consumer preferences are honored. Who's that?
It's listening to the individual, taking into account their preferences for scheduling, the types of work they want to do, and not just thinking that you know what they want or what they need.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you feel like that's something
we overall do a good job listening. Doesn't mean that it's always available.
Yeah.
What it is that they want to do.
Yeah. I was doing TA for a program, and they were working with young adults, and so they were having troubles. And they were talking about how this client would never get up in the morning, so he kept missing their appointments because they scheduled them in the morning because they're like, well, he needs to learn how to get up. But then he kept missing all of his appointments, right? So maybe you could just schedule his appointments in the afternoon and help him find an afternoon job. It's dude cannot wake up. You're fighting a losing battle here. There are plenty of jobs that start in the afternoon. So that is kind of one example too of how we provide services, if possible, to kind of match someone's preferences. And so I think more subtly too, not be judgmental about people's preferences. I had this psychiatrist I worked with, and I helped somebody get a job collecting signatures or whatever on the street, and he was like a hustler, so he loved it. I don't know if they still do this. I haven't seen it as much anymore, but it's do you have a minute for the environment? Do you have a minute for gay rights? And they're trying to get you to give them money. He did so well at that job, but he told his psychiatrist about it, and he's like, that's not a real job. Oh, yeah, it is. Dude's getting a paycheck. It's a real job.
Yeah, hello.
It's for the environment. No. Anyway, so, I don't know why I said that, but how about the last one? Benefits counseling is offered to everyone who receives benefits.
Oak Rehab offers benefits counseling. And also partner with sports persons and Social Security.
Yeah.
It's really good to get a benefits query to see what you're into.
Yeah. How many of you have ever gotten a benefits query? They're pretty cool. I love looking at that stuff. But it's important because how many folks do you meet with where they're not really sure what they get, right? But they're very different types of entitlements, and it's important for people to have accurate information about how working is going to impact them. Okay, well, you guys did a great job. The ones on the back are not in the same order as the ones on the front. So, my apologies for that. Okay. So let's see. So the practice principles of IPS, these are, sort of foundational tenets. There's 25 areas of fidelity that kind of lay on top of this, but I think these principles give you kind of the spirit of the service and a general idea of kind of how it's structured. And it's a lot better than going through 25 areas of fidelity. So here's my one cartoon. I was looking at, I teach in the IPS online course that we offer and for practitioners. And this employment specialist in Australia, I always get all these international students, which I love, but she's like, yeah, I did a presentation for an employer. And I was like, oh, tell me more about your presentation. What do you talk about? And so she sent me her PowerPoint, and it had this cartoon in it. I'm pretty sure I stole it from someone, too. Yeah, let the IPS cycle be unbroken. So, I feel like I've had all those thoughts about jobs. Hate to have a job where I get up early in the morning. Hate to have a job where you stay in the same place all day. And I'd hate to have a job where you have to be nice to everybody. There's something for everyone. Yeah. Okay, how are we doing? Should we go through the research quick and then take a break? Or do you want to take a break now? Pretty energetic. Keep going? Okay. So I talked about this on the webinar, but I'll go through it briefly again. If you want to talk IPS research, I'm happy to talk with you more. But I know this is not everybody's most interesting thing you've ever heard, so I'll just kind of go through it briefly. A lot of places have done a randomized controlled trial around IPS. This is a sort of high level of effectiveness in research, right, where you have a intervention and a control group, and you randomly assign people to one or the other, so the characteristics of the clients are the same in each group. and then you see how the employment outcomes go, or other outcomes do. And so I'm like, why do they keep doing them if there's 25 or 27? But a lot of the newer ones are in other countries, so they're trying to see in their local context, does this work? Or they may be, that's mainly it. Or just like many people are like, oh, it's different here, so we should test it out here. But in general, it works everywhere. So this is my colleague Gary Bond. He makes this graph. It's like his pet project to like add to it. So this is the competitive employment rates, which is the percentage of clients on a caseload who are working. And it's a good marker for other things too. So like the competitive employment rate kind of relates to job tenure and wage and whatever, according to Gary, genius researcher dude. So the black line is IPS, the red line is the control group, and that random orange line in Connecticut, they had 2 control groups. So you can see that IPS works better. This is where like IPS works 2.5 times better. That's where this comes from, and it really varies. So that little graphic there, but like that first is a study in New Hampshire they did in the 90s. So almost 80% of the IPS clients worked, 40% of the control. I mean, that's really high. And then it kind of goes down. So there's these like sad little ones on the end, right, on the right, and like, well, they overall were like not so good, right? So like what happened there? And the third one in Illinois, that was a study looking at folks with criminal justice involvement. So they had sort of depressed outcomes overall. That UK one, they enrolled a bunch of people in the study who didn't want to work. Oh no! So surprise, like a bunch of people didn't get a job. So anyway, it varies. And then some of those, like in Switzerland or Holland, I think having people are better taken care of when they're unemployed, right? And the labor market is really different, and so there's some local considerations. But overall, here's all the details about the studies, and everyone showed a significant advantage to IPS. The average employment rate for the studies was 56% for IPS, 23% for controls.
Wow. Nice.
In the IPS learning community, there's about 350 programs that submit outcomes each quarter, and the average competitive employment rate last quarter was 46%. So not 56, but getting there.
Yeah. So what was that? Did you say 150 what? Did you say that? What was it that that are involved in this program?
So the IPS learning community has 24 states, and then in the states, there's several programs that submit quarterly outcomes to our center, and then we compile them and give them back in different tables. And so last quarter, it's always changing, but the average competitive employment rate was 46%, and that's gone up. Like during the recession, it was like 42, so it kind of varies. But it's almost always in the 40s. And then this is looking at 18-month outcomes for people in 4 studies. So you can see that, because it's like, oh, well, more people may have worked, but I bet they didn't keep their jobs that long, or they didn't make as much money, or whatever. And so this is showing that, 70% of IPS folks got jobs, 24% of the control group. Way more people were working over 20 hours a week. People got their jobs much faster. Still not really that fast, but IPS 140 days, and then the control group 212 days. Total hours, IPS folks worked almost 4 times as many hours, and then made almost 4 times as much money. So, yeah. Research. I sent Gary this article. I was like, why the p-value should be obsolete. I was like, I don't even know what that means, but he was super into it. He's like, oh, this is really controversial, Jackie. And then this is that IPS is helpful for people across different kind of demographics within serious mental illness. So works equally well for people of all genders, ages, diverse racial and ethnic backgrounds, etc. And then this is the my highly prestigious research article that 4 people have read, that, that it has worked for those folks. This is the graph I made. So this is the, compare, the black line is IPS, the gray line is the control group services. So it's more varied, but several of the studies were adaptations of IPS, and a lot of them were in Europe, so it just varies. Those middle ones, the really high lines, those are PTSD studies within the VA. And then the spinal cord injury one is on the far right. That was in the VA too. Oh, here's the IPS learning community. So if Iowa State someday were to join the IPS learning community, and then we could get Indiana, we'd have like a whole block of people right there, and you guys would be like,
rocking it.
Yeah. And then also, like, I've been sort of interested, like, can we get Idaho or Nevada so we can have a land bridge across the United States?
Yeah.
Like, then I was like, we could get a bus, an IPS bus, and like do a road trip. Debbie's like, no.
Yeah.
That'd be so funny though, right?
And then we could go international.
Exactly. Yeah, we take the ferry to Alaska. Okay. Let's take a break. 10 minutes. Get some sun. Have some donuts. There's really good coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Other drinks.
Drinks. Yep.
Let's see. Okay, so let's just start at the beginning. This table, you had principle 1 and 2. Can you tell me what you put for zero exclusion eligibility based on client choice? Who's going to be the spokesperson for your table? Cody. Thank you for your service, Cody.
As far as definition, it was just pretty much the idea of no eject, no reject. Anyone that wants to come in, there's no, there is no. It's whoever wants to access the services is eligible to do so.
Do you think that is something that your programs do or would need to work on, or what was your discussion around that at your table?
So obviously I can only speak on behalf of TENCO. I won't speak on behalf of any other provider. But I feel like we are relatively inclusive, but we do have our own eligibility criteria for different programs. So this would be kind of a whole different avenue for us as far as the population that we serve. So no, I don't think that TENCO would satisfy that principle.
Sure.
We
I
talked
think
about,
too, it's like, oh, go ahead,
group of
yeah.
sex offenders or something like that that are tougher to serve.
Yeah.
Might not get as broad a services as others in reality.
Yeah, totally. It's not to say too with zero exclusion that you serve anybody who walks in your door, but that, of the eligible folks, like from VR or from the IHH or wherever you get clients from, that you wouldn't say they can't access your services if they're having a variety of personal problems. So using drugs or alcohol, being homeless, like.
So to that point, I would say that yes, with the minor piece of right now, we do not provide service to people on sex offender registry.
Okay.
So that would be the one caveat.
And if you can't find funding for a person, that's another barrier sometimes.
Yeah. Great. Any questions? Anybody have anything they want to add?
We just don't do services for free anymore. We just can't. I mean,
that's
why I'm right there with them.
Yeah. No, I don't. This principle more is around just not taking somebody into your program who's eligible based on like other criteria, but taking them in if they want to work. And that being the main sort of decision criteria. Cool. Great job. And then the second principle, IPS services integrated with mental health.
I guess for us, that pretty much was just that it's a full team approach and that we make sure everyone is involved on behalf of the client. That they're the main focus, but you bring in all avenues of support.
Beautiful. Yeah. Is that something that you at Tenco you do, or things people think they could work on?
So I think the attempt is there to make sure that the entire team is eligible, or that everyone is in attendance, excuse me. But I think we're in a world where everyone is pulled 1,000 different directions, so trying to get everyone at the table all the time when it's needed. Because, you know, historically, we will have people come in who want to work today, but by the time we get a meeting in place, which might be 3 weeks down the road, things change. You know? So that's probably one of the barriers, but I would say we try. The effort is there to make sure that everyone's there and it's a holistic approach. But
yeah, great. So I talked with probably all of you about integration, and I know that this is going to be something that will be a work in progress because of the rural nature of your, you know, that you're accepting clients from a variety of different referral sources. That it's going to be more difficult. It's not like you're just partnering with one mental health agency or just VR and you get all your clients from there. It sounds like for everyone it's pretty wide. And for the IHH providers, like you're referring folks to multiple vocational providers. So this is often like more of a structural principle, right? Like how can we organize so that you're getting sort of more referrals from fewer sources, and then that way it's easier to have your staff collaborate and come to meetings and that sort of thing. Great. Next one. This table.
Focus on community employment.
Thank you, Cindy.
Yes. All with each other. Working at minimum wage or above, working in the community, you know, working with integration, what I'm trying to say, you said it.
People with
Yeah.
Anybody can apply.
Anybody can apply, so. I mean, that's what support employment is to us. That's what we strive for. Every
Great.
provider.
Yeah. Awesome. How about the next one?
You guys can.
Job search starts soon after someone expresses interest in work.
This is the one that we talked about, was really interesting because this is what First Resources, throughout the history, sometimes it just happens that you get on it, you get that job and all that. But from job readiness, we move a little bit slower from doing the discovery to all that process to find the right, correct job match.
Yeah.
But so we have to rethink some of this to get on a little bit quicker because, you know, we like to take our little steps and follow them, and sometimes we're gonna have to push some of those steps out for the competitive employment, so.
Yeah, or I think that's a great point. And then sort of doing some things at the same time instead of like in steps. So that can feel a little bit squirrely for people.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we talked about the importance of rapid placement and people have an interest for employment that you start right away, and I wrote hit when the iron's hot.
Yeah. That's great. I think I'm sure we've all met clients where it's like they really had a strong desire to work, but because of like bureaucratic processes and whatever, they lose their mojo pretty fast, right? And they're like, oh, you can't help me, bye.
Right.
And so I think that like striking while the iron's hot is important because it keeps people more engaged, and then it's not necessarily that they need to get a job right away, but that you know, we're out there helping them look and
keeping them motivated.
Yeah, keeping them motivated. It's great. So the general idea is that within a month we want to be making in-person employer contact with or for that person. That doesn't mean they need to start a job right away. And sometimes that can mean going to gather information to go back to the client and share. So it's not that they need to be applying for that job right away. Okay, great. How about the next one? Employment specialists build relationships with employers based on client interests. Who's going to be the spokeswoman? It's like a game of chicken.
Yeah.
I wrote just locate jobs and employers with matching interests of the job candidate. I mean, just really simple.
Yeah.
Understanding what they want
Mhm.
and finding a job that matches.
Yeah, great. Yeah, this one's pretty straightforward. I think the idea too is like if somebody has a really random job goal, and if we don't have an employer relationship with an employer like that, then we would go out and try to make one. Versus like having a set list of available jobs or something. And then how about the next one? Job retention supports are continuous. You guys got two easy ones.
We just want to say true.
True.
Yes.
True. Okay. Yeah, this is pretty self-explanatory. And then last but certainly not least, consumer preferences are honored. Who's that?
It's listening to the individual, taking into account their preferences for scheduling, the types of work they want to do, and not just thinking that you know what they want or what they need.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you feel like that's something that your program does well or could improve on?
I think we overall do a good job listening. It doesn't mean that it's always available.
Yeah.
What it is that they want to do.
Yeah. I was doing TA for a program and they were working with young adults, and so they were having troubles. And they were talking about how this client like would never get up in the morning. So he kept missing their appointments because they scheduled them in the morning because they're like, well, he needs to learn how to get up. But then he kept missing all of his appointments, right? So like, maybe you could just schedule his appointments in the afternoon and like help him find an afternoon job. You know, it's like dude cannot wake up. Like you're fighting a losing battle here. There are plenty of jobs that start in the afternoon. So that is kind of one example too of like how we provide services, if possible, to kind of match someone's preferences. And to like, I think more subtly too, like not be judgmental about people's preferences. I had this psychiatrist I worked with, and I helped somebody get a job like collecting signatures or whatever on the street, you know, and he was like a hustler, so he loved it. And like, you know, I don't know if they still do this. I haven't seen it as much anymore, but it's like, do you have a minute for the environment? You know, like, do you have a minute for gay rights? And they're like trying to get you to give them money. He did so well at that job, but like he told his psychiatrist about it, and it was like, that's not a real job.
Oh,
like, yeah, it is. You know, it's like, dude's getting a paycheck. It's a real job.
Yeah, hello.
For the environment. No. Anyway, so I don't know why I said that, but how about the last one? Benefits counseling is offered to everyone who receives benefits.
Oak Rehab offers benefits counseling and also partner with sports persons and Social Security.
Yeah.
Really good to get a benefits query, see what you're into.
Yeah. How many of you have ever gotten a benefits query? They're pretty cool. I love looking at that stuff. But it's important because how many folks do you meet with where they're not really sure what they get, right? But they're very different types of entitlements, and it's important for people to have accurate information about how working is going to impact them. Okay, well, you guys did a great job. The ones on the back are not in the same order as the ones on the front. So, my apologies for that. Okay. So let's see. So the practice principles of IPS, these are, sort of foundational tenets. There's 25 areas of fidelity that kind of lay on top of this, but I think these principles give you kind of the spirit of the service and a general idea of kind of how it's structured. And it's it's a lot better than going through 25 areas of disability. So here's my one cartoon. I was looking at, I teach in the IPS online course that we offer and for practitioners. And this employment specialist in Australia, I always get all these international students, which I love, but she's like, yeah, I did a presentation for an employer. And I was like, oh, tell me more about your presentation. Like, what do you talk about? And so she sent me her PowerPoint, and it had this cartoon in it. I'm pretty sure I stole it from someone, so let the IPS cycle be unbroken. So I feel like I've had all those thoughts about jobs. Hate to have a job where I get up early in the morning. Hate to have a job where you stay in the same place all day. And I'd hate to have a job where you have to be nice to everybody. There's something for everyone. Okay, how are we doing? Should we go through the research quick and then take a break? Or do you want to take a break now? Pretty energetic. Keep going? Okay. So I talked about this on the webinar, but I'll go through it briefly again. If you want to talk IPS research, I'm happy to talk with you more. But I know this is not everybody's most interesting thing you've ever heard, so I'll just kind of go through it briefly. A lot of places have done a randomized controlled trial around IPS. This is a sort of high level of effectiveness in research, right, where you have a intervention and a control group, and you randomly assign people to one or the other, so the characteristics of the clients are the same in each group. And then you see how the employment outcomes go, or other outcomes do. And so I'm like, why do they keep doing them if there's 25 or 27? But a lot of the newer ones are in other countries, so they're trying to see in their local context, does this work? Or they may be, that's mainly it. Or just many people are like, oh, it's different here, so we should test it out here. But in general, it works everywhere. So this is my colleague Gary Bond. He makes this graph. It's like his pet project to add to it. So this is the competitive employment rates, which is the percentage of clients on a caseload who are working. And it's a good marker for other things too. So the competitive employment rate kind of relates to job tenure and wage and whatever, according to Gary, genius researcher dude. So the black line is IPS, the red line is the control group, and that random orange line in Connecticut, they had 2 control groups. So you can see that IPS works better. This is where IPS works 2.5 times better. That's where this comes from, and it really varies. So that little graphic there, but that first is a study in New Hampshire they did in the 90s. So almost 80% of the IPS clients worked, 40% of the control. I mean, that's really high. And then it kind of goes down. So there's these sad little ones on the end, right, on the right, and they overall were not so good, right? So what happened there? And the third one in Illinois, that was a study looking at folks with criminal justice involvement. So they had sort of depressed outcomes overall. That UK one, they enrolled a bunch of people in the study who didn't want to work. Oh no! So surprise, bunch people didn't get a job. So anyway, it varies. And then some of those, in Switzerland or Holland, I think having people are better taken care of when they're unemployed, right? And the labor market is really different, and so there's some local considerations. But overall, here's all the details about the studies, and everyone showed a significant advantage to IPS. The average employment rate for the studies was 56% for IPS, 23% for controls.
Wow.
In the IPS learning community, there's about 350 programs that submit outcomes each quarter, and the average competitive employment rate last quarter was 46%. So not 56, but getting there.
Yeah. So what was that? Did you say 150 what? Did you say that? What was it that people that are involved in this program?
So the IPS learning community has 24 states, and then in the states, there's several programs that submit quarterly outcomes to our center, and then we compile them and give them back in different tables. And so last quarter, it's always changing, but the average competitive employment rate was 46%. And that's gone up. Like during the recession, it was like 42, you know, so it kind of varies. But it's almost always in the 40s. And then this is looking at 18-month outcomes for people in 4 studies. So you can see that, because it's like, oh, well, more people may have worked, but I bet they didn't keep their jobs that long, or they didn't make as much money, or whatever. And so this is showing that, 70% of IPS folks got jobs, 24% of the control group. Way more people were working over 20 hours a week. People got their jobs much faster. Still not really that fast, but IPS 140 days, and then the control group 212 days. Total hours, IPS folks worked almost 4 times as many hours, and then made almost 4 times as much money. So, yeah. Research. I sent Gary this article. I was like, why the p-value should be obsolete. I was like, I don't even know what that means, but he's like super into it. He's like, oh, this is really controversial, Jackie. And then this is that IPS is helpful for people across different kind of demographics within serious mental illness. So works equally well for people of all genders, ages, diverse racial and ethnic backgrounds, etc. And then this is my highly prestigious research article that 4 people have read, that it has worked for those folks. This is the graph I made. So this is the, compare, the black line is IPS, the gray line is the control group services. So it's more varied, but several of the studies were adaptations of IPS, and a lot of them were in Europe, so it just varies. Those middle ones, the really high lines, those are PTSD studies within the VA. And then the spinal cord injury one is on the far right. That was in the VA too. Oh, here's the IPS learning community. So if Iowa, say, someday were to join the IPS learning community, and then we could get Indiana, we'd have like a whole block of people right there. And you guys would be like,
rocking it.
Yeah. And then also, like, I've been sort of interested, like, can we get Idaho or Nevada so we can have a land bridge across the United States? Yeah. Like, then I was like, we could get a bus, an IPS bus, and like do a road trip. Debbie's like, no.
Yeah.
That'd be so funny though, right?
And then we could go international.
Exactly. Yeah, we take the ferry to Alaska. Okay. Let's take a break. 10 minutes. Get some sun. Have some donuts. There's really good coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Other drinks.
Drinks.
Or want direction. I'm pretty familiar with most of it, so I'm happy to point you and just pull it up.
We can pass it around if you want.
You want to look at it?
Yeah, absolutely.
My colleague Sue, because I also manage this research study, and we send out letters. Actually, we print and stamp letters, and then we send them to the VA in Alabama, and then they put address labels on them and send them out. But Sue and I are always like boxing things up because she's always, packing up people's like book orders and stuff. Anyway, cool.
They said it was a fabulous resource.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, I've used it a lot in training. It's got good stuff in it, and it's pretty accessible, easy to read and stuff. Okay, how's everybody feeling? Would you say, are you energized? Or are you in like a fry coma? Put myself in a fry coma.
Like on the salad sort of.
They were delicious. So this afternoon we're going to talk about collaboration a lot about collaboration with VR, but also mental health providers and community colleges. Shout out to Angie and other folks. And then we're going to talk about using data to improve outcomes. Does anybody have any questions, thoughts from the morning, things you want to talk about? We can add to the agenda. Deep thoughts, jokes you'd like to share?
Right.
Okay, cool. Well, let's just get going then. So, IPS is meant to be a collaboration between, vocational mental health providers and vocational rehab. I've worked, and it really varies. So, like, when I was in California, we did not collaborate as much with VR, and that was a bummer, because I think that there was a lot more, like, it really enhances the service. But it was just like different local issues that made it hard. But so we're going to talk, but VR has its own processes and regulations and what have you. So we'll talk about that and kind of how they can overlay or like coexist or sometimes like agree to disagree. And it just all varies kind of on the local context. So like I've seen programs where it's like super easy. And I actually imagine it's going to be super easy for you guys because like everybody I've talked to is like rave reviews about VR. And that usually does not happen. So shout out to VR over there and all your colleagues.
Local heroes.
Heroes. So let's see. So these couple of slides just kind of show these parallels, and then we'll do a exercise. So it's like weirdly cut off. Okay, so actually I have a handout. I'm gonna get a second one here. Fear not. I was digging around on our website looking for some specific materials, and I found this. It's like, this is what I need. I didn't even know it was here.
Don't you love tools?
I like handouts.
I do too. I like colored hands. I know. I have these.
One more over here.
I don't get to it.
Oh, sure.
Read this.
Okay. So let's see. IPS helps people work at integrated competitive employment of their choosing. VR, so the missions are very similar, right? Eligible consumers. Sometimes it's like a Venn diagram, right? Like not everybody served at the mental health agency or vocational agency is eligible for VR, or vice versa. So the focus is really in the middle part of like shared consumers. Both VR and IPS have a goal of competitive employment. Same. Collaboration with providers. So IPS is really specific about this. Integration between, with mental health treatment, weekly treatment team meetings, collaboration with VR and other people. VR, identifies needed service providers and supports, and then helping remove barriers that prevent people from working. Eligibility, this is often a point of like clarification when programs are getting going. It seems like you guys have sort of worked that out already, like who's eligible or not. If and when if you develop like separate IPS programs, that's a point of conversation. Maybe. Something to work out. Because sometimes, like I've worked with programs where, it's like a substance use program. So then a lot of times those folks aren't eligible for VR.
Okay.
So kind of cross-training for the staff around what services would be best for people and kind of how that all works. Any questions about that? Seems pretty straightforward. All right. And then identifying preferences. So in IPS, we've talked about this, we honor people's preferences around services and jobs. The employment specialist will kind of go through the person's history using the career profile, which we'll talk about tomorrow. I'll go more in depth. And then getting information on their preferences around types of jobs and different characteristics that may be important to them, right? Like close to their house or not, whatever, working alone, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And then VR does a comprehensive assessment, encourages and facilitates exploration of the person's strengths, resources, capabilities, priorities, etc. And I think that this can be, so like that's the point of commonality, and then there's sometimes a rub around like doing more like pre-vocational activities, and so that is a point of conversation. Mm-hmm. So like sometimes IPS program, like IPS and VR and working together will be like, for like maybe occasionally, but very rarely or never doing like situational assessments or those kinds of pre-work things, but rather supporting the idea of more around like a work-based vocational assessment. And that somebody may be having multiple jobs, which often happens, right? Like for folks that have been out of the workforce for a long time. Does that make sense? Is that okay? Okay. And then time frames. This is another point of conversation, I think, around, we talked about this earlier, but looking at, with IPS, we really try to get somebody into the service, start looking for jobs pretty quickly, rarely utilizing any like pre-vocational training or skills assessments. And in VR, I think I stole these slides from someone else, so please correct me if I'm wrong, Cindy or Monica, but like, developing an IPE within 90 days. And some, there's like a certain time frame of determining eligibility and then additional time to put somebody in plan. And those are like RSA regs, right?
Yeah. 60 days eligibility, 90 days of plan.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Okay.
And then building relationships. Building relationships with employers, doing face-to-face employer contacts. VR. So this is assisting teams in building relationships with employers. I've seen this work so well. Like VR, I think often does such a good job of like doing employer type events and like really cool job fairs that are really accessible for people. And so I've seen where like IPS specialists or vocational people, they'll all kind of work together on that. And I think that can be really cool. The VR in California, they did these, I forget what they called them, but they had everybody like practice an elevator speech, and then they would like get up and share it, and then the employer, they did this kind of like cool matchmaking thing. And it was a really, it's like working together around a shared goal, but then also.
Job fair? Is that what
What?
Reverse job fair?
Yeah, maybe that was the concept. Yeah.
I think those are cool.
It was cool. It warmed my heart. And people got jobs, even more importantly. Sometimes VR, did you guys have like business managers where like you have like a job developer type person who's cultivating relationships? That can be so cool. Like a great point of collaboration. It's hard like in any area. Like I lived in urban Chicago, and every business I went to almost was like, oh yeah, your teammate Ray's already been here. Oh, Ray is already here. Ray is already here. I was like, dang it, Ray. We're like, we can kind of trip over each other. And so I think like if we can collaborate around building relationships with employers, that's awesome. Because then it's not confusing to the employer. And then also, once you get into it, there's just like always more jobs than people that you have, right? Which is weird because like you can get into a scarcity mentality, but oftentimes you run across jobs where like, that's a cool job for someone, but I just don't have anybody that fits that, but maybe somebody in my network does. Sharing is caring. that always bugged me, like when people are really competitive, you know, I was like, I'm not going to share my job lead with you. I was like, okay, fancy salesman, you know. And then job retention support, so, you know, IPS has individualized, ideally like time unlimited follow-along supports provided by multiple people, like, you know, employment specialists, treatment team, family, friends, colleagues. So sort of taking a bigger picture of like, what are all the supports in this person's life that's going to help them keep their job. And then VR arranging for extended services as part of the IPE and post-employment services, etc. And then lastly, benefits I think that's the last one. Yeah. Personalized benefits counseling is clearly like an area of like shared interest and resources, and that is really cool. Like I've seen, I don't know if it was a national thing or not, but like VR hiring a bunch of benefits counselors and training people to become CWICs, and like made a huge difference because it's such a scarce resource, but it's really important for people. And so I love that. Okay, so what's different about IPS? So no assessment or vocational evaluation in the usual sense, but doing the career profile as the assessment. And the career profile is more of like an interview, so it's people are self-reporting, but then you can also get information from other sources, so talking to natural supports, old employers if the client's open to it, family, etc. Doing rapid job development, that's different, so usually the time frame, like there's a rub there. Zero exclusion, people, so I've seen this more like where people have a lot of impairments and VR is like sort of they're too sick to benefit from services, or like if they can't, you know, the person's being really wacky or whatever, is like, okay, is this like appropriate for this person at this time? This happened a lot like on the ACT teams that I've worked with, where it's like, you know, they may be in a long process toward getting a job, and maybe it's not appropriate to open them to VR at this point, but like maybe further down the road. So a lot of times you don't open all your IPS clients to VR for reasons like that, really. But it's risky, right? Because like also we don't know, somebody may get a job and do really well. So, and then employment supports might be on the job or around the job. On-site job coaching is less likely to be used and not mandatory in IPS. It's interesting to me, like, I don't see as much on-the-job coaching in IPS, but I feel like people are adequately supported. So, and I actually have not worked in an environment like, I've always done IPS, so I don't necessarily, I've seen other services, but I'm curious as to your take on that. Like, I don't know if it's that there's a lot of job matching, or if it's like because you have this employer relationship, or I don't know. What do you think? Why do you think it would work even if you do less on-the-job coaching? That's an honest question.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, we do more job coach. I mean, I see it, we've been more successful with the ongoing support. I mean, we use natural supports and all that.
Yeah.
Each situation is different, but I don't know. I found that kind of caught my attention, less job coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Is it better matching?
I think the employers get a buy-in then to their employee.
Okay.
So they're the ones that are doing the training, the evaluation, the assessment type situation, rather than the job coach come in and do the training for them.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I honestly don't know, but I'd be curious to hear about your experiences as it goes.
Well, part of our, can I give you a VR?
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
So like, we have two customers. It's the job candidate we're working with and the business.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of that business service that is required under the legislation WIOA is to provide that ongoing. So it might not look like one-on-one, stand beside them while they're doing the job coaching.
Yeah.
But I think the piece that's important is the follow-up with the business.
Yeah. Yeah, that's perfect. That makes total sense to me. And I think in IPS you do that a lot, like check in if the person did disclose, which, you know, it's better to disclose, but we respect people who don't. How are they doing? Are there any problems? How can we work on stuff? Maybe meeting together, maybe doing some education with the employer. Like I had this really sweet employer, I helped somebody get a job at Banana Republic, and the employer's like, well, he's not doing so well, but I mean, is it okay if I tell him that? Like, he didn't want to like hurt his feelings. And I was like, it's okay. Like, he has schizophrenia. Like, you can tell him stuff directly. It's like, he appreciates that, you know? So sometimes, you know, just like helping provide that kind of info for people. Or like, this person's kind of neurotic, so you need to give them more positive feedback than you normally give your employees, right? Like, they didn't tell you anything. That mean you're good. It's like, they hate me. They're going to fire me.
So what, I have a question.
Yeah.
Because you said sometimes you don't tell them up front, maybe some of the barriers or some of the issues. I'd like to see that data to see if the hiring rate, if it's higher, if they're upfront about what, you know, what might get in their way compared to if they choose not to say, I have these issues, which I fully understand that. I wonder what the success rate is with that, with the hiring.
Yeah, I just read this article. They did a secondary analysis from a IPS trial where they looked at if people disclosed or not and then what the outcomes were. And it was a pretty small sample, but it was really interesting because it showed that if people disclose about their illness or their relationship with your agency, that they're more likely to get the job and they work longer and they're happier. And you think it makes sense, right? Like, because oftentimes people lose their jobs for like the dumbest reasons, right? They sort of set themselves up for failure, or it's like this really easy fix that you couldn't intervene for what, you know. So it's like, it makes sense that if you have somebody who's in that with you, that you would work longer and do better and be happier.
Or that the employer might be more willing to take a look at what's going on instead of just making a, you know, preconceived idea of why something's happening and that they just need to let the person go or whatever.
Yeah.
On the other flip side of it, though, if you tell them about some of the issues and they start maybe
looking for them.
Yeah, keep looking for them and gonna think that this wild animal is gonna come out anytime and
yeah. Right, like the level of disclosure also really varies. So maybe just like, oh yeah, we work with them at First Resources. We help people who've experienced different challenges get to work. You know, you keep it really vague. Or like, oh, this person, you know, they have a felony conviction. They have this or that, you know, like whatever it may be that the person wants to share. But it's complicated, right? And it really varies. Like, so that's where I think building good employer relationships ends up being a huge help, because like to bust that out to like a stranger, you might get lucky, you know, but sometimes you need to have like a foundation to be able to then advocate better. Yeah.
I think one of the best outcomes we've ever had, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, we had a gentleman who, I mean, he responds pretty frequently to just auditory hallucinations, but he had a job offer at our local country club, and actually requested before he got hired that he was able to go in and meet with all of the people that would be his coworkers so that he could explain to them, like, please do not be bashful, like, I can tell the difference between reality and my hallucinations, but I might be over here talking. But if you come over, I will interact with you, and I want that interaction. I mean, he just wanted to sit down before he was hired.
Right.
It was a really cool thing to watch.
Very brave.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And he's still there, and very successful. So.
I love that. Yeah.
But he wanted not just the supervisor, but the people he was going to be around every day.
Yeah.
To know not to treat him differently. So.
Yeah.
That showed a real level of self-awareness too.
Yeah.
These
No doubt. That's so cool. Yeah, it's really a personal decision. I mean, I think we all probably have really private things that sometimes we have to tell our employer, or like we think maybe our employer should learn about, or you know, it's like, okay, is this something I really want people to know about? And it's just a really personal choice. But then it's also like really normal. So that's the thing I like to tell people too, is like, I mean, most of you probably supervise people. Everyone's got something weird going on in their life. Like, everyone has to go to the doctor at some point and needs extra time off or whatever. So it's not, and especially like in a lot of, like as our folks are sort of getting back into work or getting into work their first time, they're like often in these service industry type jobs, or it's always like a really wide range of people there. So that's where like when talking to employers, it's like, this is not a surprise to me, you know, like, because this person is just like this other person I've hired, you know, it's just like, I know about this person and I sort of have to guess about this guy. Yeah. I was doing a job development training, and you know, because it's like some employers are really judgmental or snarky, or you know, they're just misinformed. And so I'd done this whole pep talk with all this new employment specialists about, you know, how to respond when you get difficult questions from employers, like, well, what's wrong with the people you work with, or like, are they going to come in here and like steal everything from me? And we go out job developing, and it's at the same time as that guy was like murdering all those people at the regional center in San Bernardino. And so we're at this like hotel, and the person's like, why would I hire somebody like that when they're like gonna come and murder everyone? I was like so shocked. I was like, okay, we're gonna go. You know, like there's no salvaging this. Okay, we're just gonna go. This is bad timing. But I've had people tell me stuff like that straight out, you know. And then I'm like, well, because it's like, oh, well, they're just going to steal from me. All these employees stole from me. I'm like, well, did they have a mental illness? No, but, you know.
It's pretty easy for people to criminalize mental illness, though. Just
yeah.
Right, yeah.
It's terrible.
And it's like, it's subtle, or it's like really overt, you know. But I think that that's like part of stigma, right? It's like we all take these messages in, whether we want to or not. And really like trying to actively work on, I don't know, getting rid of those, or like transforming them, or being really attentive to like, am I stereotyping? Like, what's going on here? Is there actually you know? And I think that's something to look for. Like, I'm sure this doesn't happen to anybody in you or your agencies, but like, I've worked with staff where they have those types of opinions, but they don't realize it, you know? And so it's like, why would I refer this person to this job? Like, they couldn't do it, or they have too many problems, or they're just going to steal from them. And I was like, but they don't have a history of theft. Like, why would they steal from them? You know, it's like, oh, well, they have this other random conviction, or they're angry. Like, some of those things are legit, right? Like, I'm not saying we don't ignore problems, but
make them up either.
Yeah, we don't make them worse than they actually are.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. What else is on here? Oh, IPS helping people with multiple subsequent jobs if the first one or other ones don't work out. And we use lessons learned from the job loss to inform a better job match. Like, I was a waitress, then I lost that job, and then I was like, that's not for me. My old boss Rick, he'd be like, hey, who here has ever been fired from a job? Like, are you still working? Yes. We all learn from our mistakes. But it's also not that everybody gets fired, you know, but like they quit because they don't like it. Why didn't you like it? And one guy is like, everybody who worked there was 20. I don't want to work with a bunch of young people. Okay, fair enough. I didn't appreciate that so much when I was like 23, but I do now.
In situations like that, I think one of the I guess questions I would have, or ideas, are you know, we all are kind of in rural areas.
Yeah.
And when we do secure placement somewhere and someone does get a job and then for whatever reason they lose it, and if it's an ugly termination, then how do we rekindle that?
Yeah.
Amen. Yeah.
I think that's one of the struggles, and sometimes it might be related to the person's mental health, it might be related to just, that was a terrible job match.
Yeah.
But then being as the provider or the support, how do you go back in and get them to open up to other
Candidates.
Has anybody ever had success in this situation? Getting the employer to be okay?
I mean, we have if it's new management. Like if it's just
Exactly. You just wait for them to leave and then go back in.
We do, that's it. Or they from Tinko to First Resources to Optimize, somebody burn us, and what do you mean somebody burnt you? So
That was that person, you know?
Yeah.
Everybody's different.
Yeah. I'm actually curious, like, have you or people you've worked with, like, had success in kind of, I've had success in doing that, but I'm curious to hear about other folks.
Well, be careful not to overpromise in the beginning. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, they've got to understand they go through employees all the time.
Yeah.
We've had to assist with the leaving process.
Yeah.
So if you assist with that, then it's more likely that you keep that bond with the employer too.
Totally.
that's a great idea.
Yeah,
Good
if it
strategy.
doesn't work, it doesn't work, and that was one of our strategies in the beginning, you know, when we're doing job placement with people is explaining, you know, we think this is gonna be a good fit, but we're not for sure, but we're here to support you as well. They're the customer as well.
Yeah.
And I guess the idea of, again, not generalizing the population we work with. I mean, that would be like, well, I'm never hiring anyone who's 23 3/4 ever again because, you know, the last one I hired was a doozy. So, yeah.
Like, I hear you, but that's illegal.
Yeah.
Threatening them really gets you places too.
Yeah, Pardon?
Right. Threatening them really helps too.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, people they just eat it up. I think it's good to not overpromise. So it's like you're selling the person based on their strengths, and you're explaining your services, but you're not going to be like, I'm 100% positive they're going to work out. You know, if they don't show up, I'll show up. You know, I've worked with, I was like, why would you ever do that? You're like,
we have 2 people that don't show up on the same day.
What else? And then being involved. So like, you know, if the plan is to go and check in with the employer on a regular basis, to do that. And then to help them so that hopefully you can catch the situation and be involved. And then also, like, going back in, you know, if it really blows up or, you know, you learn about it later, to go in and check in. And it's super awkward, you know. A line I like to use is, I really thought it would work out.
Yeah.
Somebody told me that like a million years ago, and it really stuck with me because I was like, I did, you know. And also, like, I'm not a magician, or you know, I'm not a psychic, so I really didn't anticipate that this would be a problem. I'm so sorry, you know.
Well, and the fact that they have to fill that position anyway.
Yeah.
Someone. So hiring someone off the street versus hiring someone who has the supports behind them.
Yeah.
What are you gonna choose?
You
know, at least if this falls apart, you've maybe got some plan in place to try and fix it before it's dead in the water. Whereas on this side, you don't know what you're getting at all.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I think, you know, it depends, all of this depends on the level of relationship you have with the employer, but like, if you can go in and kind of similar to what you do with your client, like, process the job loss and talk about the good stuff and what you want to do next, like with the employer to process the good, you know, it's like, you know, you made such a difference in this person's life, you know, like he did all these things. I know it didn't end the way like either of us would have wanted it to, you know, but I can tell you that this was a really important thing for him, and you know, it's gonna make a big difference in his life if the employer's into that kind of thing, you know, or like, you know, I really thought it would work out. I'm so sorry it didn't, you know. What do you think I could have done differently to help this be more successful? Like get feedback from the employer.
Taking some ownership.
Yeah, you know, it's like, what did we learn from this? Like, what's a quality? You know, is there an additional quality you didn't even realize that you needed in this job that, you know, was part of like maybe not doing the best job matching? Maybe they didn't realize. It's like, oh, we need somebody who has higher literacy skills or who lives close by. Because even though they say they're going to get here at 5 a.m., they never do if they don't live nearby.
Right.
And then sometimes people just need time, you know. So it's like, okay, thank you so much. Maybe you send them a little card, and you go back like in a couple months or something. Be like, remember me? Got somebody else for you. What do you think? Or you could try to like soft sell your way in, like, I have this person. Seemed like he's really interested in this kind of work. And would you be open to doing an informational interview with them? Just to get some experience. Oh, you like him? Oh, you're hiring him? Great. It's not easy though. None of that is easy. It's really awkward. But like what people generally do is they don't ever go back, or they wait till there's new management. But I do think that most people are pretty, like if they're mad, they'll like let off some steam. But when you go in like honesty and genuineness and, you know, like with good intent, I think that sounds like a little bit California. But you know what I mean? Like where you go in like not trying to schmooze them or push it aside, but like make amends in a way. That can go a long way.
I've always found that if I go in with the truthful feeling of how can I learn from this?
Yeah.
You know, that there's something called Iowa Nice, and that seems to work. You know,
Iowa Nice, I love that.
I mean it. I want to learn from this because I made an error. You know, can you help me learn how I can better do this in the future?
Right.
They're usually pretty forgiving. You know, especially now in Iowa, there's more openings, job openings, than there are people. To fill those openings. So you know, if you have another person, they're usually willing to take a look and give that person a chance.
Totally. I love that. Iowa Nice. I think that's true. You guys are all really nice.
Yeah, it's a great name on that.
Cool. We can work together. I should have put exclamation point there. So, you know, thinking about your program and VR or mental health provider, depending on where you stand, like, you know, I'm gonna take a couple minutes and think about and just talk on within your tables, like, you know, what are a couple ways that you collaborate well? What are some ways that you could collaborate better? And then what IPS principles do you have the most common ground with, and which ones are more challenging? So we'll just take a little time and do that, and then we'll come back together and share a little bit. And if you're sick of your table, you can shuffle around.
That's funny.
Like my mom is like, it happens. I tried to delay it. In honor of our fidelity exercise earlier, there are chocolate chunk cookies on the back table, if you need one. I'm curious. There were a lot of other things talked about, which I really enjoyed and have only positive judgment towards. I'm curious, what are some ways that you talked about, what are things that you talked about, ways that you collaborate well between different providers? Anybody have anything they want to brag about?
Twinkle Nest. We have a good report.
No, we
Yeah.
do. We support their fundraisers, they support us, we talk about individuals. We've never been territorial. It's a really, really good thing.
Are you in the same town?
Yes.
Oh, cool. You're harmonious neighbors?
In fact, there are times when we actually get together and will brainstorm clients or job options if we have placement opportunities.
That's beautiful. That's great.
Yeah, I know.
How does that happen? What's the magic?
I think it's a shared goal though.
Yeah,
I mean, our
Yeah.
goal, although yes, we want Tenco to be successful, but if First Resources isn't, then some of our clients aren't doing well. So,
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, it's that shared, the overall mission is the same.
Yeah.
It is.
That's awesome. Love that. Very good. Others? Good collaboration examples?
The RIHH works very well with the different providers as well as
Yes.
vocational rehab in our area. So it's always good to have that good communication amongst the different providers.
Yeah. Unprompted. Several of the providers said nice things about Hillcrest on the phone to me. Unprompted. So
That's
Yes.
nice.
yeah.
Molly too.
I didn't.
I can validate your.
I know you.
I'm kidding.
You gotta give kudos to Voc Rehab.
Yeah.
Because they got a great leader, David Mitchell. You can say anything to him, he laughs. I know, doesn't he, you guys?
He does.
He's a great guy, but these guys produce a great service too.
Can we quote you on that?
Yeah, oh yeah, I
Maybe
call him
some-
all the
maybe some-
time.
okay.
Yeah, I call him, I don't like something, I call him up, so yeah, but yeah, they have some great staff in the Tumwa area and Tenco, we work with them very well. I mean, they work together, I mean, like we have the consumer choice, they get choices. And I will say Voc Rehab does a very good job of not swaying their opinion. It's very impressive.
That's great.
And we have to interview which like.
Yeah, we do provider interviews for clients.
What's that?
You guys do that?
So any potential employment provider, if someone's looking for employment, then we go in and kind of sell our service to them.
Oh,
And
cool.
then they get to choose if they go with First Resources or STEP or.
There's a couple other ones. It's very fair.
I love that. It's like a sales pitch.
And really, the counselor just sits there and smile. I mean, I really admire that. No, because they, you know,
They
they're
don't do
very
this.
honest.
Not this one.
Like on The Voice.
It's more a Shark Tank.
Yeah.
Fired.
Is that something that VR does like around Iowa? Like doing those?
We do in the Burlington office. I mean, choice is a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, to allow people to self-advocate and choose who they want to, who they're comfortable with.
Yeah, I love that. I have not heard that before. It's really cool.
And some offices only have one provider, or the other one has a waiting list that might be 3 or 4 months. And,
Yeah.
And we're transparent about that, and they can make a decision.
Mhm. Very cool.
But yeah, there are definitely areas where there's only one employment provider. So we were just talking, I mean, I think you mentioned here or somewhere, wherever you're at. You're
For
part of the-
employment.
Yeah, for the employment stuff. Just the
I
competition
think
stuff.
that's the biggest employment part for this area.
Yeah.
Cause Optimate, Cindy, Optimate and Site and Run, and then they don't do them.
We don't have contracts.
Yeah.
So Van Buren, Job Ops, Hope Haven, Goodwill.
Yeah.
Cool. Very good.
Just out of curiosity, what is the percentage roundabout approximate of the number of people that you all are serving that are already connected with an IHH and are accessing the HAP service array? Do you have any idea?
If somebody meets the criteria, if they're not connected already, we're definitely making a referral. Especially if they need like long-term, some type of long-term support.
Leah was just talking, because Leah supervises the IHH, and we're thinking 30% or.
A
lot of our job development referrals are from IHH.
Where'd they come out of? What office?
Washington.
No, I mean, from Iowa City.
Iowa City.
Can I ask VR, do you typically, I know it would be up to the job candidate, but would you typically be really open to including IHH representation at meetings? Yes, and what if you had an office that wasn't consistently included, what would you?
Leanne Russo.
Oh, nice.
So, I mean, like, it's This is why I'm having a hard time with the IPS, because I feel like this is like kind of how we do things. I mean, including the whole team and making sure that people are, you know, communication's a struggle sometimes.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that they're a necessary component of the team when we're looking at the whole person.
And the thing, talking about that, the thing that struggles with it is because, you know, I always say to staff, billables. And then, you know, we have these meetings, and so I try to compact them. And, you know, that's the goal, is to get everybody there. And so we don't have to repeat meetings, because man, we used to repeat meetings tons. Because everybody wasn't invited, you know, so.
Like staffing meetings for specific clients, is that what you're talking about?
Like, you know, because there's a lot, because you have the IVR counselor there, IHH there, and it used to be case management. I mean, you know, you had to really be on it, and parents are involved, or, you know, residential, you want residential there. 'Cause I mean, really, that's, a lot of people try to get that organized. It doesn't always happen.
Oh, yeah.
We sure try, but.
Yeah, it's great when there's none.
Yeah, I worked with a program who had a staffing for every client every quarter. Well, they would get everybody there. I was like, how do you do anything else? Like, it's amazing. I mean, it really is a lot to orchestrate those kinds of meetings. But they're super helpful, you know, it's just a matter of like.
Well, and I will say, when we had private case management entities, we did meet quarterly for every client.
We did.
We wrote progress reports for every client, not matter what service they had. And actually, that's probably been, since managed care came to Iowa, one of the biggest struggles for the LTSS, the long-term service providers, is getting out of that mentality that we have to meet every quarter, because we want to know what's going on. But, yeah, so.
Do you think the outcomes were better then? Because
I think
of that,
the consistency and the communication was better, personally.
Yeah.
Only because I hear a lot of like the negative. Well, I didn't know this was happening, or I didn't get invited over here. But I think it's all been, managed care is still very new. Whether it's been here for 3 years or not is still very new.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of change within that system. So I think we're all still just kind of learning with it and adapting as we go. But at one point we did meet quarterly for everyone.
That's great. I love that. Well, it's like somebody's got to kind of take the lead to make it happen. Right? So if you have private case manager or somebody who's making sure to do that, then it's cool.
And that's where the IHH has tried to do that, but with our caseloads, right now, that's impossible. But we try to do it with at least our HAB clients.
Yeah, that's great. You know, I liked your comment, Cindy, about like, I don't see how this is different than what we currently do. And I think that that's good, because like usually this stuff is harder when people are like, it's so far from what they're doing. You're like, this is kind of what we do already, then it's going to be easier.
We don't collect as much data as you want, though, I'm telling you now. That data will be a little bit different, right, ladies?
Yeah.
I mean, we collect data,
a lot of data.
But this seems like it might go a different route, but yeah.
Yeah, I hope that we can.
Speed too is different.
Yeah.
Part of what we're already reporting through CSN, I mean, that's, now there's a lot more data to it than that, but, I mean, a lot of our employment services now, we're at least gathering the same data across the state for those that are participating in CSN data entry, so that's helpful. It's not a ton of information, but at least it's a start.
What is in that you collect?
You report per client. Whether or not they're employed, whatever the hours per week are, I think, or an average in the 2-week period. Somebody help me, because I don't enter this stuff. In a 2-week period, and the wage, I think.
Oh, that's great. I love that.
So they've added that into QSDA now, or you guys have to add it yourselves?
In the CSN portal?
Provider portal.
Yeah, we can enter that.
Okay.
There's some things that aren't quite in line with their
okay.
But they
keep you close. We can
And it's something they're talking about, because I do go to the QSDA meetings, I think we have one in April.
Okay.
Or something, but yeah.
The
And that's
NCOs
one
have,
of the
NCOs have us report quarterly too on them,
what I was just
that
gonna say.
outcome.
Oh, great.
They do?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we did have a collaborative a little further south, that we were reporting information to, I don't know who. Honestly, like every 6 months, kind of that average wage for everyone you were providing employment services for. It was Leanne and David were there. What were we doing? We were reporting stuff. We had people coming. Ashley Lance was coming.
Was it for Employment First, maybe?
Yeah, it might have been that.
But it was a grant that they had through
through VR.
Vote VR.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was our Employment First Focus project last year.
Yeah, it was like
This is
6-letter
Employment
acronym or
First
something.
too. Okay. Yeah, it's a long form name.
That's right, I forgot about that.
Well, I think ideally, I mean, there are a lot of data, like different things to track, but if we can integrate it or use what you're already using, if things need to be added, cool, but not to create a whole separate process, because that is a bummer for everyone. So.
I think that that's one of the challenges because we all use different systems.
Oh, yeah.
And if we had, CSN is custom built based on what the regions asked for it, and basically our customization for supported employment is coming through QSBA.
Right.
With the approval of whatever the cost is going to be attached to that. But I mean, that's a good mechanism for our platform to interface or move up to the NCOs. However, that leaves Voc Rehab out of the mix, and I know that you are essentially the professionals that have that ongoing perspective, according to this. And not lose sight of a person that is continuing to access, you know, ongoing employment services. So there's kind of a disconnect there from the region standpoint, and this is my little soapbox, is that we can't see anything in the Medicaid service array, so we kind of fly blind for everything. And in the meantime, we're the gap filler when Medicaid isn't in play. So that, you know, my questioning of how many people are already HAB eligible and approved, I mean, that's a big part of the population of Iowa, especially if they've encountered any services that have rendered their Medicaid ineligible.
Yeah.
For a time period, which is a big investment on our part, which is essentially, we are assuming that on our own accord, that is not who we are legislated to provide service to.
That's right.
Our services are supposed to be for those people that are 133% poverty and over. But we're doing a lot of gap filling right now, just trying to get people to where they need to be able to access the services. So just the frame of reference that, yeah, we're all in this together. There's ways that we could make the job easier if we just had platforms that help each other do what we're already doing.
Yeah.
Rural Iowa looks a little bit different than urban Iowa because our providers are pocketed out, and they do, for the SEAL region, everybody that we contract with, our providers work extremely well together, and if it's not a good fit for one, they pass on to the next. And there isn't one big agency that does all of the services, that's this one-stop shopping that's always referenced in a state plan. We don't get that in rural area. It's impossible. So, big shout out and kudos to everybody that plays well together in rural Iowa and gets the job done.
Yeah.
Despite the obstacles.
It's great. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think like the different like infrastructure, data management, like data sharing, like those are really good issues to work on in like a steering committee type situation, because you can start somewhere around ways to either work around what is the current problem or try to just fix whatever the issue is. And maybe you work around for a while and then you fix it like when you can, but it makes a huge difference when you have all the information that you need. Yeah. Cool. What are some ways that you talked about that you could collaborate better? Anybody have anything they want to share?
One of the things that we talked about, not directly, but was just through the 5 of us, 2 of us being from the same agency, like I didn't realize, I guess, how much each organization actually does. So just that understanding and the awareness of where everybody kind of fits, we get kind of that tunnel vision of what's going on within our own. I didn't know we had all these other different services going on. So I don't know how to make that better. I mean, that's more of just a personal goal I'm going to try to learn. But I just think that in general, knowing what's available.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I know our region believes in the learning community kind of idea, and that's why we have change agent meetings once a month. And we invite all providers, or open meetings, and clients, providers, anybody can come to them. And I think hopefully over time we do discuss a lot of different things at those meetings, and that kind of brings us closer, I think.
Yeah.
Well, and at times there are like provider spotlights, so people do kind of give just a quick reference of what they do. But
I love those kinds of meetings. I'm nosy, so I like to learn like all this stuff. But it's like you see people all the time, or you maybe don't see them, but like I had no idea that was happening, and that's helpful in my work to be able to reference that or refer somebody or whatever. It's great. Other ways to collaborate better?
Well, it sounds like the Medicaid service sounds like an excellent opportunity, if you want to share that.
Something that I've been training on in the Medicaid world since January 1st is a couple of codes in our HCBS employment services that are underutilized. And I believe it would be a good kind of a pre-voc service. One is career exploration. And so I've been training both the IHHs and our HCBS case managers how to utilize it, how through motivational interviewing we can bring it up. And it's a good usage of voc rehab. In conclusion of that, if someone wants to be employed, there's a little statement that is provided to us by the provider at the end of that service that would allow the voc rehab staff to better understand what the person wants to do. And it also helps voc rehab in the fact that this person, yes, wants to be employed, even though someone in a conversation might say, I want to be employed, after they've gone through that kind of initial career exploration, there's a better understanding of what employment looks like. And yes, I want to do that in order to earn money so that I can become employed. So it just helps all of us. It's win-win-win all the way across the board.
Yeah, that's
as well
awesome.
as a secondary code that would, allow some fringe benefit planning and maybe some more career exploration before we refer them to voc rehab.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah, I think so.
Does anybody ever build that code? Career exploration?
Yes.
Oh, good.
We get the funding.
What?
So we get the funding for it.
It's just very underutilized, and I think it's a really good tool. And so kind of dug it out and said, let's be using this more. Let's make this happen.
Yeah.
Because it really does kind of help. Cement's too strong of a word. What's before cement?
Firm up.
Firm up, that's it. Helps firm up that understanding of what employment looks like, feels like, and is. It doesn't really cement it, but it plants the seeds of hope. That's what I use all the time. These are seeds of hope.
Is there currently for the career exploration tied to pre-vocational services? So not, because you guys have a separate career exploration component. Is there an actual curriculum? Because I will just share our experience. We actually attempted to hire 3 career exploration specialists. That's all that they were going to do. But not with a whole lot of pre-planning, so shame on us. And it wasn't successful. I was gonna say failed miserably, but it wasn't quite that bad.
We tried it,
It was not firmed up, that's for sure. So I guess, my question, is there a curriculum out there? Like, I know it is a very, I mean, it's fast paced, it's 90 days, it's pretty detailed, and can be both group and individual. But I guess what we struggled with was there was no curriculum, and I know we don't want to be so prescriptive that we kind of work inside this little bubble, but some kind of guidance would have been awesome, because we just kind of stopped doing it.
We did too.
There's a lot of resources. You have to have the career exploration if you're gonna have continuing pre-vocational services.
Well, we're closing our pre-book on June 30th.
Yeah, so have we.
I think if you look at the state code, it has a pretty good description in there of what can fall under pre-voc.
We did career exploration years ago through Voc Rehab, and we still had that kind of curriculum and used that, and we've just evolved it in the last 2 years.
We're encouraging it, so I hope that, that service will be out there so it can be utilized for our members.
It would be good to have it again though, because it is a very first time education into employment. It would be good to have another 37 year or two or something like that after the agreement, and they try again.
Would that include doing like informational interviews or taking somebody to community college to like learn about
job
different
shadowing kind of sort of things possibly, but more like tours, seeing what it looks like to work at Walmart or wherever they might be interested in.
And it's been a while since I've read that, but you can do partial group right up to 2 to 4 people.
I think so.
Maxed at 4. Okay.
I can send some resources to folks if
That'll be
Lynn
awesome.
has the mailing list. There's a lot of, there isn't one standard career exploration curriculum, but there's a lot of great resources out there on career exploration and career exploration activities, and I can share you some information from the rules about what, and it's not limited to those things, but it has a really nice list of a lot of activities.
That would be great, because I think unfortunately we kind of put the cart before the horse and got really excited and hired these people without a true understanding of what their role was going to be, and gave them all this freedom and thinking that was going to be awesome.
Lynn, do you have everybody's contact? Okay.
And pleading ignorance, why is there 2 different types of career exploration, one that lives within Voc Rehab and one that lives in habilitation?
Thank you,
There's just one.
Thank you.
One is Medicaid and one is
Voc
Rehab,
Rehab.
and they're 2 different, even though they're called the same thing, they're different.
Can I speak a little about
Yeah,
VR
you
side?
please.
So that's part of the job of a vocational rehabilitation counselor is career exploration. So if we can do it in-house, we're gonna do it in-house. I mean, but where I'm seeing this Medicaid service as being something that would be awesome that fits in with VR is maybe we do the intake, and at the intake, it's decided that this might be a good option for them to get started on stuff, to strike when the iron's hot, like you say. And then while we're getting our medical documentation for eligibility and, getting close to the planning piece, I mean, this can be done by the time we sit down to write a plan.
Sounds like a really nice marriage, doesn't it? I love that braiding of service, don't you?
We can't authorize career exploration until we're already into the process, and career exploration wouldn't be for everybody. So if we, had the manpower to be able to do that, and we have the resources, we've got Career Scope, we got lots of things at our fingertips.
Theirs is just way more in detail, more in depth, whereas it's kind of more like tours to see would I want to be employed in this sort of setting.
Yeah, the one under when CMS added it into the employment services or pre-book services, it was, I think it's really, the population they had in mind was like those sophomores, juniors in high school that really need to start thinking about what do they want to do, what can they do, that kind of stuff. So it's a bit more of a trimmed back, fluffy service than what VR does.
Right, it's a pre-book to pre-book, or it's a pre-exploration type of. To what they have. I have found it just to be a great tool to introduce what it would look like. Maybe it's been 20 years since someone's worked, or never, it's a great way to kind of get started before they even hit maybe discovery or your career services.
And it goes along with the whole idea of informed choice. You know, how
Right.
can people can't make an informed choice if they're not informed?
Right.
If they don't know what they're looking at, you know, if I've never, you know, thought about what it looks like to work or what my day might be like if I work, or if I've never seen somebody doing the kind of job I think I might be interested in, then it's really hard for me to envision what, what that could be like. So, yeah.
Well, I think, you know, to speak more broadly, like career exploration is important for almost everyone that we serve, right? Because there's a lot of jobs we don't know about, like the clients may not know about, or like you're saying, when they worked 20 years ago as a receptionist or a file clerk, I want to be a file clerk. It's like that job doesn't really exist anymore, you know. Right. But like, what are you good at? What do you like? And like, let's go check some places out, and that can be super helpful for people. And then also in the career development vein of like, okay, you've been doing great, whatever, working at Dollar Tree, and now you feel like you want to do something more. Like, let's go talk to Angie at the community, like let's look at these different types of programs, because there's all kinds of stuff out there, right? And a lot of times people are just not in a world where they see a lot of people working in a lot of different kinds of jobs, right? So what they see as possible may be very narrow, and I think that is important work that we can do to help broaden that for folks, because there's just no reason why everybody needs to be in a part-time service job, right? Like most of us, it sounds like we started there, but we're not there now, and we want to support people to, you know, kind of reach their dreams or like get to their fullest potential. And like, I worked with a lady, she worked for like 12 years at Banana Republic steaming clothes. And she never missed a day, and she was like super loyal and loved it. And I thought that, you know, I was like, that's really cool. And then also like, did she ever want to do anything else? Did she think that that's all she could do, or, you know? So that is, I think, sometimes, like, I think in the next, like, Fidelity, you know, like, as IPS continues to be developed, I think that that piece will be more explicit around. It's not that it doesn't support career development, but it's not, like, it's not at the forefront, you know?
I think we tend to get into habits of what services we provide or what we always do with every client, and I think, you know, to kind of disassemble it a little bit or deconstruct it. Yeah. Talk about the food world, you know, deconstruct it and allow something different. And, you know, as I was kind of digging through the code, I thought, you know, this is something that's really underutilized that I think we should really kind of take another look at it again, because I think it's a really good tool. Yeah. Just to allow someone to envision, could I see myself here? Could I see myself working? Yeah. And good for staff to like continue to learn about all different kinds of jobs, right? Like, I mean, even in the 10, 15 years I've been in this field, like there's a lot of new kinds of jobs all the time, right? And like self-employment options and just different kinds of things. Some of them are scams. A lot of them are legit, right? And so, like, in our own sort of professional development, which can be hard if we're like almost, you know, like very frequently working within a certain sector, right? To continue to like expand. Cool. That's great. We should take a break, right? People need cookies.
Listen to you.
Let's take a break. 10 minutes. Live the dream.
Live the dream.
Yeah.
Hey,
huh?
So, get started. I did not make a copy of this, but so I want to talk about using data to improve outcomes. VR is very good at this. I'm curious for the other providers, do you look at your employment outcomes and other data points and use that in your planning or quality improvement? And if so, in what ways? Thank you.
Well, the MCOs are attempting to do that, but I don't know that they've figured it out yet. So our managed care organizations now have to report employment outcome data for part of their contractual requirements.
Who does it go to?
The state.
Okay.
But it's not collected in a consistent way or comparable way to like the regional data or to so some of the earlier conversations. So, and it's not, right now each managed care organization has a option of how they collect it, and they collect it differently. And so it's a little bit of a problem. So even though there's some elements that could be utilized to drive the importance of employment and employment outcomes and incentivize employment outcomes, right now we don't really have the right kind of data that we're collecting and that gives us an accurate picture. But we're working on it actually. We are trying to work on a more unified system across the state.
Yeah, that's great. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
I think on a program level, collecting data and actually like examining it and using it is really helpful. And so that's what this is about. You know, you can use it in a way to acknowledge staff for the work that they're doing, right? You can measure your program across time. And so that is useful. It's also, I think, for me, like I'll get really into things on a micro level, and then taking a step back and looking at data and outcomes is really useful to be like, oh, like we're doing really well, you know. But like in general, we're a problem-oriented people, and so and also, but like you can always do more. And so, when I was an employment specialist, my supervisor would share data, and I thought that I found it really helpful because I was like, oh, you know, I didn't even realize like 5 people got a job this quarter, you know. So I'm more focused on like that one dude lost his job right away. So you can use it for program improvement overall, looking at trends, and then also you know, individual staff supervision, right? So if you have all of your employment specialists or whatever, and the data points are the same across, you know, like it's listed for each person, then you can look at, are there training needs? What's going on? You know, maybe one person is really underperforming, or maybe everyone's doing great, or whatever, like, or nobody's making enough employer contacts. And so as a supervisor, manager, it can be a tool then for planning different, you know, so like, okay, we're going to do field mentoring, or next week, instead of having our team meeting, we're all going to go out and job develop together, like, which is fun. I'm an extrovert, so I love that stuff. But, you know, or like, I'm going to harass my team every week about what employer contacts they're making, or whatever it may be. So it's just a way to examine kind of what things may be going on and use it for quality improvement. And let me see if I forgot anything. Okay, so the outcomes we want to track are probably things you already do. So, you know, client outcomes and then process outcomes. So client outcomes are things like job starts, right? Name of the employer, etc. If they're starting school or in school, that's a thing to track. Anything else? And then other details related to their job, like wage, hours, etc. I just keep like waving this thing around. I'm going to put it down. And then process outcomes are things like numbers of employer contacts. If you have a way to track it, like tracking how much time people are spending out of the office, like providing community-based services. How many days till first employer contact for different clients. So the IPS Center has a supervisor data table, and it's really just an Excel spreadsheet. It's very simple. you can use as a template, but probably you already have your own systems for tracking things, and so maybe just if there's things to add in, or if there's things you can take out of your current system, even better, taking things out, but to be able to then have all this information.
So you track like referral.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to track, like where you're getting your referrals from. I know that many of you serve like cross-disability groups, so you might track stuff related to demographics like that. We did that, like one of the teams, mental health teams, an agency I was working with. So it was a standalone employment program, and they worked with a bunch of different case management teams. And with one team, we looked at the data, and like almost all the referrals were from one case manager, but nobody else, right? So then it's like, okay, can we go to that team and try to like promote employment more, or see like what the deal is, why everyone else is such a hater. So that can be really helpful.
Or you recruit that referral person.
Yeah, exactly. Really tell us about all your positive experiences referring your clients to employment services. You can also look, and so using data to like look at trends within your own program. So are things getting better? Are more people getting jobs? Is it getting worse? There's always staff turnover, like whatever. How's that going? But then also comparing your data to different benchmarks, right? So the IPS Center has, like I mentioned earlier, all these programs submitting outcomes. And so they've set benchmarks. Don't quote me on this, except for it's on film in perpetuity. But I think it's like a 30% competitive employment rate is sort of like okay, or like on the lower end, 40% is good, 50% is really good. So that can be something to strive toward. And I want to emphasize that using data to improve outcomes is like not a way to make programs feel bad or like feel like you're not doing enough. Almost all the time it ends up being a tool that helps people feel good about the work that they're already doing, And so, and I would encourage you, if you can, every agency has their own culture and different considerations, but to be as transparent with your data as possible. And not to use it as a way to create competition on your team. Although healthy competition can be good to a point, but just as a way to like support each other and be transparent in that. Okay, and if you can't, you can just collapse it all into like team level data, which is like a little bit less meaningful but still good. Okay, so we're gonna do an exercise here. Let me move that mouse. Okay, so this is just I didn't make a copy of this. I'm sorry, but it's a really simple data table for a month. And so the employment specialist is on the left, and those are like several of the IPS national trainers, and then Debbie Becker, who's like the boss lady. So these are real people, but they're not really employment specialists. So I made myself the low performer. It's never good to make yourself the hero of your own story, right? How could Jackie do a better job? Okay, so then there's the caseload. How many people on the caseload? Number of job starts. This is for July. Number of clients working. The competitive employment rate. Number of face-to-face employer contacts in the month, and the number of clients in school, and then the bottom line is the totals. So a few important things to note. One, what is the ideal caseload size of an IPS specialist? 20 or less. And what is the, I just told you the competitive employment benchmarks. How many face-to-face employer contacts are people supposed to make each week? We haven't talked about that really. Anybody know? 6 per week. Okay. Face to face with a hiring manager. So in a month, they should be making 24 on average. And then there's not really any there's not any current benchmarks for number of clients in school. In my experience, I did like a big push when I was in California around this, and then I've been doing this national survey. It ends up being around 10%, which I think is way too low. But I feel like there's not super good mechanisms for capturing that information, so I feel like some of it is underreported. But anyway.
Jackie, when
Yeah.
you say clients in school, what level of education are you talking about?
Yeah, anything. Any sort of like regular mainstream.
Post-secondary,
Some
or
people may be in high school.
it could be just any school at any level.
Yeah, or like
Okay.
community college or
Okay.
some kind of training program. But generally you want to track like people who are in like sort of regular mainstream kind of educational programs or schools. So like if your agency has some kind of training program but it's not open to everyone, like anybody, you know, it's like not a sort of regular thing people would do, then you wouldn't count that necessarily on here. And it varies. Like if you're serving young adults, I know that several of you work with high schools, and you know, it's like you might have a lot of folks in school that you're supporting, and that really varies. Like you might be going to IEP meetings, you may be helping with study skills or linking to campus resources and stuff. So, and that's a whole other skill thing to be doing, right? But many, you know, IPS specialists will do that. Okay, so in looking at this, there are 4 questions. What questions does this information raise for you? What else do you want to know about this team? What are the strengths of the team for this month? What are areas of improvement for the team for this month? And what goals and action steps might you set to improve the performance of the team or individual staff? So let's do like a sort of lightning round where we're in our tables talking about one question for like 2 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll just do that for each question. Okay, so just talk about the first question. What questions does this info raise for you? What else do you want to know? I'm sorry you don't have a handout. That's kind of awkward. Lightning round. What are some questions that it raises for you? What else do you want to know? Throw it out.
Want to know about the clients.
Yeah, like are like some of the clients more work than others, or what exactly would you want to know about them?
In general, what kind of disabilities are we talking about? Maybe age ranges. You know, if this is their first job for all of them, or what?
Yeah, great. Other things.
Are they in a rural area or an urban area?
Yeah, like are there any local considerations? If this was your team, what else would you want to know?
I'd want to know what Sarah is doing, or what Sandy's doing differently than Sarah, and vice versa.
And why the two of them?
Well, between the two, they have the most people working. Sarah's making almost double the employer contacts. Why doesn't she have more people working?
It's great.
This may have already been said, but I want to know what some of the barriers are to one meeting and set that baseline benchmark for face-to-face contacts.
Yeah, definitely. Like want to dig in there. How come nobody's meeting the standard? And it's even within everyone not meeting it, like there's a lot of variation, right?
I'd like to know what other community supports the people that are working or accessing.
Totally.
Are they all working in the same community, or are they split up in different communities? That's another thing that can make a difference on how many job openings there are.
Other things? What else do you want to know?
I want to know if Jackie was on vacation for a couple weeks at work.
It was such a sweet vacation. I didn't make any employer contacts. I was at work, I was just like in the field. No. Getting a tan. No. Yeah, like were people out? Were people sick? You know? I mean, 1 month is a pretty short amount of time. So like things could be really different. There's like specific issues, and you would know that because you're like the team manager. Okay, great. Anything else? All right, good. Okay, let's do the second question. What are the strengths of the team for this month? Talk amongst yourself for a couple minutes. Anyone?
They had 2 people starting a job.
2 people started a job. Woohoo! What else?
The competitive employment rate is almost 40.
Decent, yeah, 39%. Good. Other strengths that you can tell from this?
There's 22 people working.
Yeah, 22 people working. That's good.
And I thought Sarah's 17 employer contacts was a strength, even though it didn't meet the benchmark.
Yeah. Yeah, it shows that it's possible to make at least 17, right? I mean, there may be structural issues or like overall challenges that are making it hard for people to meet that, but like usually if there's like one person who's actually getting close to it, that's a good sign that it is possible. And they're at pretty good capacity, right? Like they have some space, 4 people. I don't know how many clients Debbie would end up actually working with, but their program's being well utilized. That's good too. And then what do you think are areas for improvement? Let's just do this one together. For the team, how can they improve?
We need to increase their face-to-face employment.
Yeah, they need to make more employer contacts for sure. What else stands out?
Even out the caseloads maybe, if possible.
Even out?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like maybe distribute folks around a little. And sometimes these, like, you know your individual contacts, so it's like maybe Jackie's still new, so like she's kind of still growing her caseload, or maybe maybe Sandy was doing a lot of job coaching that month, and so she wasn't able to make as many face-to-face employer contacts. But I know that every other month she's really good, it's like a fluke. What other areas, other things that stand out to you?
We don't know if folks are FTEs or PTEs. And then we don't know which ones their documentation supports reimbursement and actual income driven from service rendered.
Yeah. I like it. Yeah. So this is in no way a complete picture, right? Because maybe Sandy made the most money for the agency because they get the most money from doing job retention support or job whatever. So that might be something to track. A lot of agencies track productivity, right? It's like you have to make 70% whatever billing time. And then what goals and action steps might you set to improve the performance either of the team or individual staff? What are some things you may try to do?
I think since you've kind of established a baseline with Sarah's face-to-face employer contacts, maybe making that your initial goal that slowly grows to your 24, since she's proven that's attainable for that group.
Would you like phase it out, or would you just say everyone needs to make 24 in August?
Me personally?
Yeah.
I think it goes back to revenue. I mean, if there's revenue attached to that, we'd want to jump in because obviously our program's not going to be real sustainable, but if not, then I think phasing it, just so you, I mean, for me, I wouldn't want my team to do face-to-face employer contacts just to make sure I meet that quota. I'd want them to be meaningful contacts. So I guess I'd phase it.
So you'd, like, dependent on sort of what other priorities there might be. Yeah.
Or maybe give them, like a different weekly goal. So if 6 is tough, then let's start with 3. See how easy that is for you. And
Yeah.
Or you could make the goal that each of your people gets at least one of their clients gets a job start in that month.
Yeah.
So that'd be their driving force until you get that at least one job start. Keep going and making those employer contacts, so that every month you get at least one job start. It depends on how many clients you have.
So like if I make my job start on like July 4th and I'm like
you could cruise for the rest of it.
Thank you for that, Ken.
Isn't the contact going to be dependent on how much time you're out in the field job coaching?
Yeah, I mean that's not on here, but that would be a thing to track. Yeah, definitely. Other team or individual goals or steps? Some things for like job development, things that help are like to go out together as a team, especially if your staff are new and they're really nervous about it. Like there's beauty in like suffering together, because I think sometimes people think like, oh, they do it better than me or whatever, you know, and so it demystifies it. Or, you know, doing individual field mentoring, so the supervisor going out with the person individually. It's sort of like exposure therapy, right? Like, so it's like you just have to keep doing it until you feel comfortable doing it and then like get more proficient. And some people it comes really easily to them, and some people it doesn't. And it did not come easily to me. It took me a long time to feel comfortable job developing, but you know, it's possible. So and then also like you could pair your staff up to go out together too. Because it's like, you know, so if you have one person who's really good at job development and another one who's learning, like having them just go out to, people love it. They don't like it initially and then they like it, you know. Because it's fun to get, to see how another person will do things, and then they talk shop and it's fun. I worked with this guy, Ricky, and he was an employee. We were on the same team, and he had like everybody in his caseload had a job. I mean, it was just like one of those people. And he had all these people. He had like people on his caseload with like one lady who like had, you know, people who just like committed these terrible crimes or like registered sex offenders, like all the things. I was like, how do you everybody do that? So we went out job developing together, and here's what happened. Ricky, oh hey, you know, hey Malia, how's it going? Oh, you know, how was your trip to Vegas? Like, did you guys go bike riding? That's so cool. Oh yeah, my kids are doing great. Yak 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 yak. And then I'm like, are they like what? And then he's like, oh, would you mind interviewing this guy? Oh sure, bring him by Tuesday. Okay, see ya. You know, and I was like, oh, okay, I get it. Like, it was eye-opening for me. I was like, I'm overthinking this. Right? I mean, obviously, and like they talk about sport. Like I can't talk about sports, you know, but you can talk about stuff that interests you, and just get to know people, and then make your ask. So. Yeah, it was so funny. It's like, you have got to be kidding me.
The secret sauce recipe.
Yeah, he was just really charming and like fun, and they're like, oh, and he just kept coming back. So it's like, oh hey, how's it going? How was your birthday? Oh cool. Yeah, I found that like the second I stopped caring so much, I like stopped being so neurotic about it. I was like much more successful. So it's like It's just relationship building, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Anything else about this? It's good to look at quarterly data. That's even more helpful. You get sort of like a better sense of trends. You can use the data to set, one of the fidelity items is using, like sharing quarterly data with your team and then using it to set goals around performance. And so a lot of programs, like you were saying, Ken, it's like one job start a month, something like that, where they'll have team goals, you know, or individual goals, or like for newer staff or people who are underperforming, like Jackie, you know, it's like, okay, you really have to focus on your employer contacts, and so, but like making them concrete, so like not just, I need you to get better at this, but like here's a number, you know, here you can measure. And that's the nice thing about our work, is that it is very measurable. Like people get a job or they don't, or and you may dig deeper, right? So it's like if everybody's working at Hy-Vee, then you're like, okay, let's diversify. You know, everybody make employer contacts not at Hy-Vee for a while. Stuff like that.
Can I ask, what are some of the parameters around the number of different employer contacts? Like, you know, as far as that diversifying, I don't remember. I've heard something, but I don't remember what it is.
So there's two fidelity items. Like one is quantity of employer contacts, so that's the 6 per week. And then there's one about quality, and that's more like, are people going back and building relationships over time, learning about the needs of the employer, and then advocating for their clients. And then there's some items around like, of the jobs that people get, like how many of them, are they diverse in type, are they diverse by employer? And so it's like a little bit of a formula, but basically you want, gosh, I can't remember right now. It's like 95% of them to be different, or
yeah, enough, like you track.
Yeah.
So the face-to-face employer contacts would probably be like new employers or employers of people that are already working, or?
Great question. Yeah, so the employer contacts on here are strictly for job development. So like once somebody gets a job, even though you're making contacts with that employer, it's not counted toward that. So that's a common mistake. Like people will put job retention contacts on their logs and then they just cross them out. But we're like, good, keep doing that, but don't put that on here. And then you can, it doesn't matter what, like you can go to the same employer 6 times in 1 week. It doesn't matter. Yeah. You don't want to do that unless it's like intentional, because you don't want to pester people excessively. But like I was giving this table the example of like, maybe a job developed there on Monday, and then they're like, oh, bring the person, oh yeah, I need the person, bring them in tomorrow, and you bring them in tomorrow, and they're like, oh, they have like another interview on Thursday, and you go with them on Thursday. That's 3 contacts right there.
But you don't want Sandy, Sarah, Jackie, and Debbie all going to Hy-Vee.
Right. You don't be like Jackie and Ray. Ray's already been here. Oh, I met your coworker Ray. Oh yeah, Ray. You want to coordinate? Yeah, that's good. We have one of my old colleagues in California, an employment specialist. He developed this cool like basically a Google form that you could put a shortcut on your smartphone. It sort of functions like an app, but it's a way to like input your employer contacts in the field. The nice part about it is that it dumps into a spreadsheet. You can just do this in a spreadsheet too, but like tracking your employer contacts in a spreadsheet, and then you can kind of sort and filter in ways so you're like, who's been to Hy-Vee lately, or Target, or wherever. And then as a supervisor, you can look at it too, like what types of employers are we visiting? Is everybody in this one town? You know, like, so that's actually, I think, a really helpful tool. Because people can just get kind of stuck in a rut of like visiting the same employers, but like it's important to know because you're in small communities, so you want to not be tripping over each other. And then if you have staff leave and new people come in, you can kind of know where that relationship was at, because a lot of times that continuity is not there, and so then you're like, well, I think that person went there back in the day. Maybe we can go back and like try to reestablish contact, and it can be kind of awkward. So, doing that tracking is cool. And there are sample forms like on our website, but I'm happy to send them to you too, if you want. Do your job developers now track their contacts in any way? Yeah, so it's probably very similar. And we use those when we do fidelity reviews because we look at, like, are people getting job because we have them attach either like client initials or their name to the contact, and so it's like, are people getting contact for employers that they're interested in and like that match their preferences? So we use that for individualized job searching along with like some other things. Okay. Lynn, you have like a whole chord situation. I keep like wanting to go around that way. I'm like, it's like a booby trap.
Trying to not get myself tangled in it.
Okay. That's Oslo, our office dog. Debbie
Oh.
Becker's dog. He's so cute. We had put him on our website as a research assistant in training. And then, yeah, I think that's it. All right. Cool. So, it's 3:15. You're welcome. No. So tomorrow we're going to be in a different building.
Courthouse.
The courthouse.